That's okay.
Okay,
We've got,
with, it being after 7 o'clock, we're gonna call the, yeah, what is the date today?
It's 7:05 on the 11th.
Yeah.
It's the 11th.
The 11th.
7:05
Meeting
p.m.
to order at 7:05. And start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
First order of business is approval of the minutes for 11/19.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? And that's unanimous. 242-1642, we are going to table right now because we,
12:17.
12:17 minutes too.
oh, they are ready, I'm sorry.
Doug reviewed
And
those.
12-17-14.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. 242-1642, 492 Sutton Street, we're going to have to table for now because we don't have a quorum. Next one is NACC 137, 240 Charles Street.
And this is new, so we have to read it. You being the closest to me.
Pursuant to the authority of the North Andover Wetlands Protection Bylaw, the North Andover Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, February 11th, 2015 at 7 p.m. in the Senior Citizens Center located on 120R Main Street, North Andover, Massachusetts 01845, for the filing of a notice of intent by Greater Lawrence Sanitary District to alter land at GLSD easement, North Main Street, to Lawrence municipal boundary, map 72, 17, and 12, for the purpose of clearing of vegetation and accumulated sediment and debris on top of existing easement to maintain access to infrastructure within wetland resource areas and riverfront area. Plans are available at the Conservation Office, 1600 Osgood Street, Suite 2035, by Louis Napoli, Chairman, NACC.
Thank you, Jed.
I think this one's fairly simple and can hear from the consultants.
For the record, it's Mary Rimmer Environmental Consulting, and with me here today is Sherry Cousins, the Superintendent for the Greater Lawrence Sanitary District, and Richard Weir, who's the Capital Project Manager. And we're here today on a notice of intent for maintenance of the existing easement, and you know that this is a plan showing the actual easement location from North Main Street to the Lawrence boundary right near the 495 bridge there. The sanitary sewer was constructed in the 70s, and periodically there's vegetation maintenance required in order to protect the infrastructure that's within the easement. It's been 15 to 20 years since any significant vegetation maintenance has occurred, and so that's why we're here tonight. We are exempt under the State Wetland Protection Act for maintenance of existing sewer easements. Your local bylaw mentions several different utilities, but not specifically sewer easements. So that's why we thought it was safe to come before you with this notice of intent under your local bylaw. I included in the notice of intent some photographs of the easement. I have, I think, some blow-ups too. Most of it is most of the stretch from North Main Street to about this bend right here is all riprap roadway. Basically, it's a large flat boulders. Some of you may have seen or walked along the easement there, and then it drops off along the banking, and the banking is vegetated with mostly saplings, some silver maples and river birch. There's a fairly steep slope. What GLSD needs to do is clear that easement both on the riprap roadway and within 4 or 5 feet on either side of it to make sure that they have continued access for equipment to be able to reach manholes and things. Once you get to this point here, it's more or less of a cross-country route right out to the riverbank itself. Portions of the easement are actually underwater, in the water, and go under the bridge there. So this cuts across. There's a little bit of wetland that it crosses right at this point here. So we included that as well. The work is in riverfront, land subject to flooding, and a small amount in bordering vegetated wetland. The work is expected to be done primarily by hand, with hand equipment. Is that correct? And the manholes themselves, some of them have been covered with silt from river flooding. They need to be cleared off. They'll be hand shoveled out, and that material taken off site. All of the vegetation will be chipped and brought off site as well. So they intend to cut the stumps at grade or just above grade, and paint any of the stumps with an herbicide to prevent resprouting. We don't want to have the roots infiltrating into the pipe itself. GLSD will do periodic monitoring of the pipe through TV camera inside the pipe. Is 72-inch pipe, so they actually walk through the pipe to be able to do that. And that's, I'm not sure if I've forgotten anything, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Al?
Just real quick, estimated habitat, you're within estimated habitat?
Correct, yes. All along the stretch of the river, and the interceptor is also in Lawrence and Methuen, so we've submitted a MESA application to Natural Heritage for all 3 towns combined. We've had initial consultation with MESA, with Natural Heritage, and their initial response was that it'll be fine, but they want the filing, and they want to have all 3 towns reviewed at once. So that's been submitted. We haven't received a response yet, but it's pending.
You've been out there, so I would rely upon your observations. Any nesting habitat for the eagles along the river that you think you?
It doesn't look like it to me. No, I think it's mostly very young growth. It's really small
No
trees.
mature timber that you think, or maybe 1 or 2? Or?
Not any mature timber that needs to be taken down as part of this project.
Okay.
Most of the clearing is pretty small stuff. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Pretty much this along the riverbank, that's the granite trunk line where the main pipe is, correct? Right, so that's not a lot of maintenance. The part that I'm curious about is on the top side, that red line continues all the way up to the plant, correct?
Yes.
Is that where more of your
Go to the pumping station in Riverview Street, so the interceptor stops.
oh, that's as far as you go? You're only going as far as Riverview? Oh, so you're not even going near the plant?
No, the fourth main product portion from the pumping station in Riverview Street was recently installed.
Right. Okay, I remember that, yeah.
Folks, back a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So that right away is not an issue. It's mostly in our road. There is a crossing across private land, goes down the person's driveway. It's not part of this.
Okay.
As
Yeah.
a matter of fact, when we did the force main project, there was somebody went out there and well, actually, I think it was Lisa. They looked at bald eagle habitat and found none in that area. Back 2 years ago, all the bald eagles are habitat, and the nesting areas are in Haverhill. They did the same thing, with this guy.
Okay, just for reflection, like I said, we did a couple of site reviews. I was out there a couple of times when you did the pipe, the big pipe, and we were going. There was an area, it was like it was washed out, and we were talking about you were going to go there, and there was some mysterious pipes coming out of garages and households. Do you remember those?
Yes.
Now that's not part of this.
No.
You moved forward and went through that driveway, correct? So that's as far as you're going to go. So you're not going to get involved in that funky area that we were looking at before.
The you're talking about is in back of the parking lot expansion. They put a detention basin in back of the dance studio there.
No. This is way up.
Originally, the force main route that was
Where you
originally
did the
proposed across
where you
that
did the
big ditch.
crossover under the railroad tracks, you ended up pulling it back because there was that, you were going to do a big restoration. So that's not impacted at all, because that was the the area, so it's pretty much okay, I know,
Basically Riverview Street, down upstream, to the books.
and you're stopping, what, at the Shawshene River? Okay. Okay, I'm all set.
And we would like also, I just wanted to add that a continuing order to be able to continue to do this work, subject to whatever conditions you have, so that we don't have to come back in 5 years or whatever that it is that, whatever the vegetation, the interim will be in between your
So the
clearing
O&M
activities.
would be incorporated into the order as an
Right.
attachment.
Doug?
No questions.
Jeff?
No questions.
Deb?
What types of equipment are you gonna be using for this?
Types of equipment, just handheld equipment.
On the stone portion that Mary explained, they may bring a wood chipper down there and a small truck to chip it into there. The portion in back of the dance studio, that would be handwork. And it's pretty sparse in there, so I don't expect a lot of removals, but there may be some.
There's not much understory here, so it'll just be a very limited amount of clearing there.
There was one big down log, would they just like cut a path through it
Probably.
kind of thing?
Yeah, just as long as you could get
Access through.
access through it.
And when are you planning on doing this?
Spring?
We would be bidding out the clearing work in spring, so sometime during the summer, sometime soon.
And how long do you think it's gonna take?
I would think that it's probably 3 weeks. You know, some of it we may do with our own forces, and some of it will be bid.
Thank you.
Sean?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. I asked Jen, if it gets approved and stuff, that we do, when you hire the contractor, if we can do a pre-construction and know how they want to plan on attacking this. Because I think, I would say there's a lot of silt on around the catch basin stuff on that top wall. So I think there's going to be a bobcat or some type of machinery there, so.
There could be, we found most of the manholes on the stone portion there, and the portion that's towards North Andover, because that's subject to flooding, that really there's a manhole at the corner of where it turns. And then the next manhole is actually up in the high ground, right before the shore sheet.
In Lawrence, actually. The
In
manhole is actually in Lawrence,
So,
yeah.
In that area where it's covered, you can't really see the stonework because it's been flooded so many times. So there isn't any manholes left.
Okay, thank you.
So some of the special conditions, I know we can't close this because we haven't heard from Natural Heritage, but would maybe be to put a time of use restriction on it, that you would do it in a low flow period of the river, so we wouldn't have to worry about any inundation while you guys were out there. And second would be that if any, as determined by the agent during inspections or by the environmental monitor, that if stabilization was needed, you would provide.
Sure. Yep.
Okay, any more questions?
Yeah, we're actually not planning on pulling these stones.
Right,
So-
but just even if you had to bring some kind of truck or bobcat or something out there to remove something, or the chipper or whatever, if there was any need for it. Certainly not within the stoned right-of-way, I wouldn't
That's why I
anticipate.
suggested a pre-construction. I think it'd be better for everybody. Okay. All right, any more questions? Need a motion to continue? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And your next meeting is what day?
2 weeks. 25th, I think.
Yes.
Mary, when was it filed that we would anticipate that 30 days, that
30 days, it was filed 2 weeks ago.
so we should be pretty,
Yeah, January 29th. So maybe wait 2 meetings?
well, just, I think, make a call before the next meeting, just to make sure. And then if we can't, we'll continue, but.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next one is 242-1643, 674 Turnpike Street.
Is this one already open? No.
This is no 2, right, Jen? Jen?
What's
You have
that?
to read this one?
Yep, I'm just getting it right now. Thank you.
Sure. Pursuant to the authority of the Wetlands Protection Act, Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40 as amended, and the North Andover Wetlands Protection Bylaw, the North Andover Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, February 11, 2015, at 7 p.m. in the Town Hall Meeting Room, second floor, located at 120 Main Street, North Andover, Mass., for the filing of a notice of intent by applicant Mohammed Yamin to alter land at 674 Turnpike Street, map 98D, parcel 21, for the purpose of replacement of an existing septic system within the buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. Plans are available at the Conservation Office, 1600 Osgood Street, Suite 2035, by Louis Napoli, Chairman.
Thanks, Jen.
So this site was before you previously. There was a pizza restaurant, I believe, proposed here. This is next to the McGregor Fence Company property. So the wetland was delineated some time ago. It was reflagged based on that delineation, but unfortunately, I have not been able to relook at it. I don't anticipate that it's changed much. I think the C camps originally delineated it, if I recall correctly. That being said, it's a failed septic system, so there is sort of an immediate issue. You're obviously not going to be doing immediate work, but this will require a waiver from the Board of Health since it's less than 100 feet from a wetland. It doesn't necessarily require a waiver from this board, but I know the Board of Health will look to your recommendations regarding their waiver. And I'm sure, as Jack will discuss, there's sewer in the street, but they can't tie into it because it's one of those, I think, private force mains. And the gravity sewer is a rather long distance, maybe more than 400 feet from them, so.
Okay, just to add on to what Jennifer said, for the record, my name's Jack Sullivan. I'm owner of the Sullivan Engineering Group. The property owner, Mohammed, is here with me as well. When Mohammed originally purchased this property in June of 2012, it had been a bank-owned property. He knew when he purchased it had a failed septic system involved. Probably about 12 to 18 months ago, he contacted me to look into the property to see what could be done, if we could tie into the sewer system or if we need to upgrade to a septic system. Originally, I thought we'd be able to tie into the sewer. There's a pump station located about 450 feet easterly towards Stop and Shop. And with a force main, if I did a grinder pump for this property, I could do a force main and extend to that pump station. About a year ago, though, the DPW stopped allowing force main connections. I think I provided with the application an email from DPW saying they no longer allow the individual force main connections. So in that case, a gravity system would have to be extended up the shoulder of Route 114. It would be too cost restrictive. It's over 400 feet from the site. So I went back to Plan B, which was for a upgraded septic system for this property. As you can see, the highlighted yellow line is the 100-foot buffer. There's a paper street that basically looks like the driveway for this property now. So the entire soil absorption system will be within the 100-foot buffer zone to the wetland, and the septic tank will be within 75 feet. The local requirement is you have to be at least 75 feet away. We'll be 52 feet away with the septic system. The Board of Health, there'll be two variances they'll have to provide. The 75-foot setback for the septic tank, which is required. As I said, I only have 52 feet. And the 100 feet for the soil absorption system, I'm providing 61.6 feet. Susan Sawyer, the Board of Health, can grant this variance without having to go to a Board of Health meeting through a local upgrade approval process, since I'm providing an alternative treatment system, which is called a microfast system. It's a denitrification system. It's a media system. When the sewage comes into this tank, there's a blower system that activates the wastewater, and wastewater sticks to a media system, and then clean effluent moves out to the soil absorption system. I did submit to the Board of Health. I received some comments back from them. They're very basically minor to deal with. And I'm going to look to make changes in the next week or two and get them back to Susan Sawyer for approval. The big limiting factor with this, as Jennifer stated, is the amount of snowfall. I'm not sure when we'll be able to actually look at the wetland flags that are on the ground. But I have very little options. No matter what I do, I'm going to be within inside of 100 feet here. It is a failed system. Muhammad was served by the Board of Health to get something going on this. Technically, once you have a failure, you have a year to upgrade, where he purchased it from the bank. And that's when he contacted me, when he got the notice from the town that he had to do something here. And I was so busy over the last 12 or 18 months, it was more me delaying this than him. So we wanted to get this in. It's something he'd look to do once he gets approvals in the next calendar year. He's going to get everything upgraded. I'll turn it over to the commission for any questions you might have.
Thanks, Jack. Sean?
So there's no way to get it any further away than where you have it?
No, because you can see where the soil absorption system is situated now. I think I'm 12 feet off the property line. I have to be 10 feet away, so I'm as far away as I possibly can be away. It's a high groundwater table. I couldn't even do a perk test. When we did the perk test, I actually had to take a soil analysis, send it to a lab at UMass, just so they could do an identification on the soil, because when I dug the test pit, the water was so high you couldn't even run a perk test here. So I'm as far away as I possibly can be.
And although you need variances from the Board of Health, you don't need any waivers from us, is that correct?
That's correct.
I don't have any other questions.
Okay.
Jack, I understand what you've designed.
Yep.
I'm just baffled that the DPW won't allow a tie-in on a force main. That
Yeah.
makes absolutely no sense to me. I mean, that's just the most
It's not
ridiculous.
the tie-in that they won't allow, they won't allow a private force main from this lot to the system. And you have to understand
They allow
why.
them all over town. They're all
Right,
over
but
town. They're
that's
everywhere.
become very problematic. And
Right.
I totally, and I think Lou totally understands why we're not gonna do that anymore. Berry Street, prime example, there's like
Why are they
12
problematic?
force mains in the road. It's just not, it's not good.
That's the problem.
They know who they are, who they belong to when they go in.
The problem is when they fail, who fixes them?
They don't belong to
Well,
the town,
well-
they don't belong to the
town.
owners,
I
it's
agree.
become problematic.
But this one is,
You know, when you put them in, I'll just editorialize and then I'll shut up. When you put them in, you start paying a sewerage fee to the town. They don't give it away, even though it's a private line. You're still paying a water and sewer fee. So I know who should fix it. I can't believe they won't.
And like I said, that was the direction we took. We thought we were going to go with a force main. So I lost like 8 months because kind of did the survey work. We were going to do the force main. It's a state road, so I talked with Mass DOT to go in the shoulder. And then when I went to meet with the DPW, they provided me an email because I said this is going to be a problem when I go. I thought more with the Board of Health, but I also knew with you guys that it would be a problem.
So if he put in a gravity line, which I know is expensive, if he put one in, would he own it? And would he then be able to charge a fee for everybody to tie in?
I doubt it. If he put it in within a right of way, that it wouldn't be on private property. It would be, the town would basically take over. He
what I'm
wouldn't be
saying?
able to recoup his charge. He'd have to pay the full fee. It's not something that then, let's say McGregor then said, I'm going to tie into it. Mohammed wouldn't see any of that money. He'd basically make that improvement, and then whoever on the way
The gravity
connected-
goes the other way, not toward McGregor. That's the force main side.
Right, but he'd be going by McGregor's property to get to
To the gravity side?
that the
to
gravity
to
fee
the
went
pump
to a
station.
hillside. Oh, no, the pump
the
station?
gravity feed goes out through an easement out towards, I think.
Woodley.
Regardless of which way it goes, my point is, if he puts in a private line, it's a big problem, but if he puts in one that everybody can tie into, it's no problem. That should be a problem for us.
Logistically, if that's gonna be the only one that's gonna be tying into that unless McGregor develops his land, which has the pump station right next to him.
Right.
So, I'm surprised that the town does not want to eliminate septic systems. And I'm also surprised, like I said, this building, this area is zone business. Okay? So you're going to design a septic system for that house.
Yes.
At some point, if he decides to put a restaurant in there or whatever, the septic system is not going to be the right size for the building that you're putting in.
I know.
Okay, so now you got two issues. Now you could conceivably have a piece of land that's zone commercial that can't build because they can't build a septic system big enough for him to develop it. And that's wrong when there's a force main sitting right there.
But the problem with that too, Lou, is if let's say someone wanted to come and redevelop this property. Right now, it's a 3-bedroom house. Let's say someone wanted to come in with a big restaurant. The only reason I'm even going to get a variance from the Board of Health is because this is an upgrade for an existing structure.
Exactly.
Once I did a new
Change
use,
change
it would
use.
be all new construction. You never get the variance.
And this guy's gonna get whacked twice.
So,
Did you speak to Tim Willett himself?
yes, and I have an email from him saying they don't allow it anymore.
If I can tomorrow, I will go talk to him.
Okay.
Because I don't think it's right. I don't think it's fair to him, and I don't think it's fair to the wetlands, because why put a septic system near a wetland when we got a sewer main
Well,
sitting right there?
It's not just the proximity to the wetland, it's the ground table.
Right.
The water table is up to the top of the ground. That area is
Right.
inundated at all times. It's questionable whether it would even function correctly.
Well, it's part of the issue about developing this area commercially.
Well, I mean, we all know what it's all about.
I hear you, and that's a different conversation,
Right,
but
right.
there's the potential and the alternative is there. If the town would allow them to do it.
I thought it would be a wash. The force main cost versus the septic cost is about a wash over this run. But once you started looking at a gravity extension, it became
Right, but
too
then,
costly.
but at least this applicant has an opportunity to develop the land. If you let him put a septic system for a 3-bedroom house,
Right.
he's dead in the water, and I don't think that's fair.
The town used to allow it, but like Jennifer said, they ran into some problems.
What happened
There are
was
some bad situations.
It went roughshod,
Yeah.
and people made commitments that didn't honor them. So that's what happens. But I think this is a isolated situation. I think maybe we could talk to DPW. Maybe we can ask them to reconsider.
Fine.
I mean, I do that. I mean, I just don't like the way it is. You have more questions?
I mean, we have some time with the snow, so if
Right.
you want to talk with DPW and see
Yeah,
if
I will. I got the plan. I got the plan with me, so. Doug?
No
what do you think?
questions.
Jack?
No questions.
Deb?
Just one about the microfast system.
yeah.
How new is that?
It's been around for a while, over 10 years. It's not a brand new system.
Why did you decide to use that?
I needed something that offered denitrification, and it's one of the systems that's DEP approved for denitrification. The only way to get the variance from the Board of Health is if you put in a system that offers denitrification. So there's a few products out there, but microfast has been around for a number of years, and I've used it on some other sites in other towns and had good luck with it, and so I just picked one that was state approved and went with it, with a history.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions? All right, we need to continue anyways, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Like I said, I don't mind when we continue out till it could be.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm
We're just trying to help you.
Maybe
trying to
try
help.
to, you want to go 311, 325?
yeah, give me,
which-
because I got, right now I'm straight out, but I want to.
325 would be fine.
So 325?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Keep thinking that.
Okay, next one, 242, no number, 287 Forest Street,
This actually got a number.
okay?
What was it, Donna?
1644.
1644?
It came in today.
Still under review, though.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pursuant to the authority of the Wetlands Protection Act, Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40 is amended, and the North Andover Wetlands Protection Bylaw, the North Andover Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, February 11th, 2015, at 7 p.m. in the Senior Center, 120R Main Street, located in North Andover, Massachusetts, 01845, for the filing of a notice of intent by Paolo and Sherry Marnado to alter land at 287 Forest Street, map 106A, parcel 81, for the purpose of relocating a shed, paving a gravel drive, and installing an in-ground pool, patio, and fence within the buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetland and ephemeral pool. Plans are available at the Conservation Office, 1600 Osgood Street, Suite 2035, by Louis Napoli, Chairman, NACC.
Thank you. So there was a prior order of conditions on this site for the development of the 2 lots that are off this driveway. It has a certificate of compliance. As Greg will tell you, there's a shed that's since been located on the property that is not in compliance, but the general proposal is for a pool, relocation of the shed, and paving of the driveway. Again, we're kind of stuck not being able to confirm the wetland line out there. It does largely agree with what was previously flagged on the site. So, you.
Good evening. Greg Hockmuth here for the Marnodos. Just as Jen said, in 1999, the lot was developed. I think Christensen and Sergi did the plan. It was a common driveway to develop 2 lots. An order of conditions was issued. There's a vernal pool located here, and there's BVW all around the lot. There's a large wetland here and a small pocket wetland here, and they're connected. So that's why you see the line, it's contiguous. Then there's another small wetland off-site, and the buffer sheds onto the lot also. The clients know that their shed is where it's not supposed to be. They didn't prior to placing it there, but they do now. And they're fully willing to move it to a spot that does comply. They talked to a company that can move it with a crane. And it's right off the driveway. The crane can set up, swing it over to a new location up here on the hill. We are proposing to grade this to create a level area. But it's outside the 50-foot no build, and the work to grade would be outside the 25-foot no disturb. But a small corner of the woods here would have to be encroached into off the existing lawn. The area where the shed is, and there's a little lawn area here too, we're proposing to restore that. And Jen recommended that we put in a little bit more than just seed mix. We completely agree. So we're going to propose some shrubs and probably a couple trees in that location as well. Let's see. We had to submit this to Natural Heritage also. We haven't heard from them. DEP's still reviewing it. There's a ton of snow out there, so we know we're going to have to wait until we can see the ground. And I do have to add, too, there's 2 dry wells. There's a dry well here and a dry well here that are shown on the as-built plan that are not shown on this plan. I need to add those. But as far as the main purpose of the project, as Jen said, it's really 3 things: the shed relocation, the pool and patio, and then half their driveway is currently still gravel. It's right in between 2 wetlands. It's right up against the vernal pool. So as a result of where it's located, we're requesting a waiver for that work. And I don't have a lot of data on the driveway itself, and we talked a little bit on the site walk, Jen and I, and I mean, just seeing this before the snow, it's almost impervious as it sits now. It's a gravel driveway. It's been driven over for years. I'm not sure what the benefit of having it gravel is now versus paving it. It's a maintenance headache. Every year they have to add to the potholes. There's puddles. I'm sure that material's migrating into the vernal pool and the wetlands. It's a very shady area, so if this is paved during rain events, I can't imagine that the surface water will heat up to the point that would impact those wetlands. I think paving this personally would not have any detrimental impact to the wetland, and actually moving forward require less maintenance. Because it's going to be difficult to trench erosion controls in along the driveway here during the construction, I'm proposing filter sock, and that's what we show here in this yellow. For the rest of the project, I'm proposing hay bales and filter fabric. It shouldn't be an issue trenching and installing stake bales. But the bulk of the work in the backyard, with the exception of this corner and this little tail here, just to recover the grade, it's within existing lawn and maintained landscape areas. Let's see, what did I miss? I flagged this after, I think Leah Basbanes had flagged this too. I kept her flags out there. They're generally in the same area. Yeah, that's the project.
Thank you. Sean?
I think I know this property. And is there, it's not town water out there, right?
There's wells.
There's wells.
Yep.
Is there a common well on this, between this house and the house next door?
No, there's a common septic.
Common
Well, no,
septic,
not a
that's
common septic, but the septic for this lot
Yep.
is on the abutting
It's on
lot.
the abutting lot.
But the abutting lot also has their own separate system.
Right.
Can't do that anymore.
No, I remember. And was, the guy that developed this, was he a lawyer in town, do you remember?
I don't remember. I have the deed in the file.
Because if it's the property that I'm thinking of, I looked into it and considered buying it back in 2001, I think it was, when it was finally finished and put up for sale.
It was a lawyer's property. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
That
Joyce.
That might have been, yeah.
Ralph
Yeah, and one of the things we looked at before we bought it was paving that area up front, and that was an absolute no-no at the time. The Conservation Commission, well before I was ever on it, said that was something they certainly wouldn't allow. So I know that was the thought process back then at the time.
Surprisingly, when you review the file, the driveway, wasn't, the plan doesn't say gravel drive. At least I didn't, in the,
There was a special permit issued.
the planning board
For the
required it
planning
to be.
board. It doesn't require it to be gravel, but it's
This
shown
isn't-
as gravel.
I have
And
the- I
there's
have the-
there's some language that talks about shared responsibilities, and
Right.
but I couldn't find anything that prohibited the paving of this driveway. No continuing condition or any notes on the record plan. But my guess is, back in '99, whoever was presenting the project,
Presented it as gravel.
well, we're going to keep it gravel. It's going to be better. It will allow infiltration. It always sounds good.
Right, so the Conservation Commission permit does not require gravel, nor does the Conservation Commission record plan show it as gravel. The special permit discusses gravel, and then there's a letter in the file from one of our prior agents that allows the paving of the driveways from the point beyond
Pretty
the
much here.
common.
Yep.
Each of them is paved beyond that, and that was allowed, but they weren't allowed at that time to pave the remainder, so.
Well, I actually recall the filing, and there was a lot of agreement made without conditions because of the vernal pool on one side and the proximity to wetlands on both sides.
Well, and when this came before the commission, the drive had already been constructed.
Yeah.
There was a violation of
Yeah,
some
no,
sort.
this was one of those, this was an interesting filing. I remember it, and there were a lot of agreements, is the best I can
The
tell you.
hard part is now to say, I don't disagree that probably the gravel driveway is impervious at this point to this, in the same way that a paved driveway would be. But you really can't tell because it's covered in snow.
Right. I want to be able to get you some data to show what's there now and be able to show the pros and cons.
So one of the things we talked about was maybe if they did go and pave it to provide some kind of treatment or gravel edge to the driveway or something that would provide the same benefit that they were hoping the gravel itself would provide.
But pavement contains petroleum byproducts that gravel does not, unless they're buying dirty gravel. There are a lot of things about bituminous concrete that are adverse, exactly what we don't want introduced into the. There could even be MBTEs in it. We don't know. Louis would probably know more about what's in it than I do, and I'm suspecting he'd agree. But I think that if we're discussing that, and it sounds like we are, the proximity to both wetlands, specifically the vernal pool, there's got to be a lot more than a little treatment, just to be able to entertain the discussion, because of what I believe the pavement can bring in terms of, just rain events when it washes in. It doesn't look like there's a lot of distance between. I don't see a lot of area for treatment. I'm looking at wetland flag A28. There doesn't seem like a lot of distance there. And sometimes you'd talk to us about, grassy areas with level spreaders and some type of treatment. I'm not seeing the opportunity for treatment there.
It's really tight there, and I don't want to propose an infiltration trench or any type of
Yeah.
stormwater management feature that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So I want to be able to dig a hole next to this, see what the substrate is, see where the water table is.
I appreciate that. And I guess my biggest concern just at first blush is the petroleum products that come with paving.
Right.
We know what's in there.
Right.
And we're not sure we know everything that's in there because nobody's ever really analyzed.
Well, it changes all the time. I mean, they
Well,
use
there it is. I knew he'd know.
They're using recycled asphalt products all the time. They're even using contaminated soils as a sand base for the mix.
Right.
So, for me, it's a 20-foot easement, correct? Is it 20 feet?
Let's see, I don't actually show the easement on here.
I had talked to Jen about it today. Like I said, because we weren't even sure if it was approvable because of maybe no order of conditions. I was
20 foot.
20 foot. So,
Yeah.
if they did a 12-foot roadway and did, 4-foot stone shoulders, just some alternatives to throw it out there. I don't even know if it's approvable because of the vernal pool. It's fairly level, if I remember correctly.
But it's the composition of what's going
Right,
to
no,
wash.
I agree,
it's
I
the-
agree.
property very well.
I agree with that. That's,
It is a very, very thin road as it's currently set up.
right. So I'm just throwing stuff out there for alternatives. There's a job that I looked at truthfully in town and it's gravel. And they wanted to pave it and I didn't even bother to go in front because it was even conditioned or they weren't sure if it was and they wanted me to go get the letters and I was like, that's okay, I'm all set. So, but if they come up with some alternatives and go from there, that's all I can say as far as that. The other question I have is, what's the fill, does it look like, how big a fill is it in the back? Is it
So
a
it-
2-foot fill?
The yard was filled previously to create a level area behind the house. At the edge of the woods, it's a 1-to-1 slope down to existing grade. In one spot, it's almost 10 feet. So we met with the pool contractor, and that was a big discussion. What is the fill? Are we going to be able to put a pool on top of this? Did they remove top and sub before they put the fill? So there's a lot of question marks there.
Right, because I'm looking at 151 and then 142 at the base.
Right. And that's part of the reason we wanted to hold that edge and then start the project a safe distance from that, so we didn't have to kick it out too far. But I'm barely touching it here, and I had to kick it out about 10 feet at a 2-to-1 slope just to catch the existing grade. So yeah, it's very steep on the back, and right now it's packed with boulders. It's a 1-to-1 boulder slope on the rear.
Okay.
This I kept 3-to-1, just so we could loam and seed it. We could tighten it up, even put a small wall in to pull it further away. But I think 3 to 1 will work there.
Okay, and also when, next time you come before us, if you have, construction access and stockpile.
Yep, yep. Access is gonna be up around the side here.
Right.
It's gonna be tight. They're gonna have to strategically build this.
Is construction equipment going to make it down that gravel driveway?
Yes, yep,
Yeah.
yep. Yep, they had a couple different pool contractors out here. I think South Shore Gunite is the one that they're leaning on, and they've worked in town before.
One other point, and it's about the driveway. It actually escapes me at the second. But, I mean, personally, I think that should definitely stay gravel, and that's what it was. You know, somewhat recently, we had another applicant come in front of us, and they wanted to have a roadway just like this go through a wetland. And in the end, we didn't even allow that project to go forward, and they redesigned the whole thing, and they end up finding a spot where they could just build one house and put it in the front. So for
Greg
me,
permitted that.
that was you. I thought you might remember that one. So
I
to
think I left halfway through it.
yeah. So for me, it'd be a tough pill to swallow to go ahead and change that existing driveway from gravel to bituminous concrete.
Yep, and we're not gonna ask the commission to make a decision tonight, and I do wanna be able to pull together some more research just to see exactly what it is. You know, was it laid on top of ledge? It has that look to it, at least this side of the road.
There's something in the permit about there being a former roadway there and access to something else.
Well, if you see this, it's kind of ghosted here. This is Old Forest Street. So a portion of this used to be the road.
Right, there's,
And then there were all sorts of logging roads throughout here too. This actually extended further, and part of
Right.
the violation was they relocated the driveway to here and fixed all this.
that's why I asked Greg to put plants back in where the shed was, is because that was a restoration area that was previously planted.
Yeah, the reason why, to my memory, the septic was on one property, and I think they have a well that's from the other property on this property, was just because it was so tight and they were so restricted with what they could do, they had to do all this common ownership to try to build
There's
two
information about
homes there.
a lot line change somewhere in the process too.
It's one of the things that kept
Yeah.
us away from buying it. Right, because
Part of it was land court. It was,
Yeah.
yeah,
It was a
it was a
mess.
nightmare just reading through the file.
Those are my
But-
thoughts.
Yeah, they're both on wells. Yeah, this well is right here for this house.
All set, thank you. Al?
Good.
Doug?
Yeah, I have a few questions. The propane tank that is proposed, is that an above-ground tank or below?
Above ground.
Above ground?
Yep, and I've been told since the plan was designed that we need to stay a certain distance from the pool equipment with the propane tank. I think it's 10 feet. So we're gonna have to relocate that slightly, and they're considering a vault to put it underground somewhere on the property.
Okay, so you're gonna be changing the plans?
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
My other question associated with that was, where does the truck that refills the propane tank, where does that park
Right.
in order to,
Right now, the
Refill.
tank is behind the house here. It's not shown on the plan.
Okay.
But they currently have a propane tank behind the house. And the truck parks in the driveway,
Okay.
and they can fill it from there.
Yep.
Because the original thought was to tuck it further away, on the other side of the house. They talked to the propane company, and that would be a little bit more of a challenge. I think they would have needed a different type of truck to fill that tank in that location. So getting it closer to the actual driveway was preferred by the gas company.
okay, so it sounds like it won't be adjacent to the proposed shed.
It'll be somewhere near that shed. We may pull it a little closer to the driveway and put a small screening fence in so you don't see it.
Okay.
But they can bury it, right?
They can bury it. Yep.
Mine's buried.
Yeah, and all you see is a little,
off the driveway
it's
and
like a
fill
septic
it.
tank riser cover.
Yeah.
So the intent is then it'll be relocated to a spot where you can refill it from the driveway?
Right,
Okay.
yep.
My other question is about the the pool system, the filtration system.
Yep.
What kind of system are they proposing?
It's a non-backwash filtration system. It'd be a cartridge filter. You just take it off, hose it out.
Yep.
There'd be no backwash required.
That's what we prefer.
Yep.
All right.
I'm surprised we've never made that mandatory in our conditions, because we require it anyways.
We do, I know, because all of our projects are near the wetlands, so
Right, right.
just remains, okay, I'm all set. Thanks.
Deb?
No questions.
Okay, so we need to continue.
Yes, and it probably makes sense, the second one in March.
325.
Yeah, that way we'll give Heritage enough time and hopefully do some more research out here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Move that we continue to,
Motion to continue to 325.
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous.
You don't take any easy ones, do you, Greg? I said, you don't take any easy ones, do you?
Next one is, we have a, not that it matters, but we have two continuances, 242-1634 and 242-1635, both Royal Crest request to continue to February 25th.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that's unanimous. Okay, now we'll go back to High Street. 242, number 1 High Street.
This one?
Hi, good evening.
This has to be, isn't it, is that right, Ken?
My name's Dominic.
Sorry,
So we have, this has to be read, excuse us.
Oh, no problem.
Whose turn? Jack's turn.
Yeah.
Pursuant to the authority of the Wetlands Protection Act, Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, as amended, and the North Andover Wetland Protection Bylaw, the North Andover Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, February 11th, 2015, at 7 p.m. in the Town Hall Meeting Room, second floor, located at 120 Main Street, North Andover, Mass., for the filing of a notice of intent by applicant RCG North Andover Mills, LLC, to alter land at 1 High Street, map 69, lot 1, for the purpose of control nuisance and non-native aquatic vegetation with herbicide and algicide at East Mill Pond within land under water bodies and waterways. Plans are available at the Conservation Office, 1600 Osgood Street, Suite 2035, by Louis Napoli, Chairman.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you. This is a project very similar to ones we've seen at Stearns Pond, Stephen Pond. I think the species are different,
Yes.
but similar, type of filing and probably a similar type of order of conditions.
Thank you. My name is Dominic Maringolo. I'm a senior environmental engineer with Aquatic Control Technology. My colleague Matt Salem is here, and a representative from the applicant, David Steinberg, is here as well. Yeah, we're presenting an aquatic management program for East Mill Pond. This is about a 2.6 acre pond located downstream from Stevens Pond. It's in pretty bad shape. It's just under severe eutrophication. Also has an infestation of 2 invasive species, water chestnut and purple loosestrife and phragmites around the shoreline. It's also pretty shallow. But we are proposing management of these plants in order to restore some open water habitat to the ponds, improve water quality, and also try to slow down the continued eutrophication of the pond. As described in the notice of intent, to go after the water chestnut, purple loosestrife, and the phragmites, we're proposing to use US EPA state-registered aquatic herbicides, specifically Renovate OTF, Triclopyr, Clearcast, Amazamox, and as well as Aquapro glyphosate for the common reed and the purple loosestrife. In addition to the vegetation management, we also have included in the plan, if a need arises to control algae or water quality, we have copper-based algicides in there as well. One of which, Sea Clear, is actually also a water quality enhancer and provides some phosphorus reduction. But we are, again, as you folks know from our other work in town, our company is licensed by the Department of Agriculture to apply these products. They are registered, again, with the EPA and the state. They've been reviewed as to their safety for use in lakes and ponds. We also, in addition to the Commission's approval, we also need to obtain a permit from the Mass DEP, Office of Watershed Management, which lists the specific products and amounts that we're going to be using in the ponds as well. So this is going to be a multi-year program. We expect there to be a fairly extensive pond-wide treatments, especially of the water chestnut, in the first year to 2 years. After which we may look at doing some hand pulling of the scattered plants that may remain, as well as some hand pulling of the loosestrife and Phragmites. But these treatments have worked very well to control these invasive plants and kind of restore a balance to the pond as well. Once the weeds are cleaned up, we have been kind of talking with the applicant about also considering an aeration system for the pond to try to improve the oxygenation, overall water quality in the pond as well. So that's the program in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Sean?
Just looking at some of the thoughts and notes of our administrator. So are you looking for a 5-year approval similar to Stearns Pond?
That would be appreciated. Yeah, we do consider these maintenance projects. We do evaluate the procedures every year, and based on the control that we achieved and what we find coming back. But we would consider this a maintenance type of a project, so we would ask for 5 years.
And another item that she noted is that there is an open order of conditions that had expired in June. And I think it is generally against our policy to go ahead and look at another one until that has been
Not
resolved.
sure.
An RCG issue, and Seth did address that you intend to file for but you can't do an as-built at this point, given the snow cover and that sort of thing, so. I mean, the projects are unrelated, but, we don't want to see things go on too long. RCG's before us across the street on a similar project, they're not someone who's unresponsive and not available and, sort of disappeared from town. We have issued orders on top of orders and cited that, there is an open order on the project and the expiration date. I think I'd feel comfortable doing that in this situation, but.
What is the timetable? The timetable for the two projects would be similar.
Right. Couldn't you do one and then bang, bang,
They're
1
not-
week
they're not
apart
gonna start
almost?
that tomorrow.
No, they're not obviously doing pond work now. I don't know when you're anticipating
Oh, no,
start
we'd be,
date.
going out to do the initial monitoring, probably not till sometime in May. The treatments would occur, in the June to September period, so it's more of a longer spread out project.
So chronologically, can we go ahead and have the first one closed out before this one starts?
I think so.
That's all I had. And again, those are just notes that Jen picked up, so I'm not taking credit for any of that stuff.
I'm all set.
Yeah, I'm all set too, and I talked to Jen about the closing out the original order before moving forward with this one. I know you guys do great work, but it's just the way we do things. Stop finish one project, move to the next. I know they're unrelated, but that's just the way it's much cleaner that way instead of us jumping all over the place, especially where they have another project across the street going on at the same time. So we're
Right.
kind of like.
So how does that affect the logistically? Will you not issue an order, or will it be conditioned to
I
the
would
other
defer to my more experienced commissioners, what their take would be on that.
We can do a number of things. We can not issue until a date certain, or we can issue with an effective date for start of work. We can issue an order that prohibits the start of work until preconditions are met, which has been the past practice that I'm most familiar with. an order of conditions with preconditions. And that's,
That sounds reasonable to me. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not familiar with what the other project is, so we'll have to talk with.
we would provide all the
Just,
assistance we can.
What is that other project, Jen? What's the open project?
That was the additional parking lot and work at the East Mill that was permitted
So
in,
it's the same area, just a different project. Yeah, that's,
it expires, it received Permit Extension Act.
yeah, but it's at the East Mill, so it'd be easy enough. They're going to be set up there anyway. Be easy enough for you to clean it up.
On that first project, you did all that work, we actually tried to clear areas, but some of the plantings weren't taken.
Right.
Some areas were being disturbed, so we did another round of signage, trying different plantings. So we literally for a few years, and I guess the last week just dropped the ball and never closed it out.
Well, if-
We expect that,
Did they actually get the plantings growing beyond those signs?
I think most of those plantings are doing okay now.
Okay, well, that'll be good. We did try to close it out, you know, that's definitely an accurate description of what happened, but it wasn't ready to be closed out.
Well, if it's not ready, they can request an extension. They have a one-year extension coming that they're due if they want it.
I think they may have all their
I mean,
extensions.
it's a large project with a small
Right.
piece that we weren't able to close out. Very localized area where the plantings were taking on the bank. So, yeah, our preference is to close out.
So you-
Hopefully we can. I guess the worst case there would be those plantings didn't take, we could start over again in the spring.
It's not so much the plantings, it's that they had planted the plantings and then the landscaping people were mowing behind the markers, was pretty much what it came down to, so.
Yeah, there's some of that going on, maybe get that stuff.
Right, so it was really just that planting piece that was the issue. So you're saying we'd issue an order of conditions, but we'd make it contingent on receiving a certificate of compliance?
Exactly. It's just simply exactly that. We could issue, we could close an issue, and we could put preconditions to the commencement of the first order, of the second order upon completion. Yeah, exactly. It's really very simple. Less than a page of instructions.
One condition, actually.
It can be as small as you want it to be, no doubt.
Doug? No questions. Jack?
Yeah, I do have a few questions. How do you plan to apply? Is it Amazamox?
Yeah, that's actually, it would be a topical treatment, so we would, use a low pressure spray boom to lay the herbicide right on top of the exposed water chestnut leaf that's right on the surface.
So you'd spray a solution onto the
Yes.
surface of the water?
Yep. And we may, usually with that type of a technique, we get a good portion of the plants the first treatment, but we oftentimes will have to come back a few weeks later to do kind of a follow-up application to take care of the plants that were missed with the first one.
Now, the plants does it kill the plants?
Yes.
Okay. What happens to the plants that die?
They sink down to the bottom, decompose as they would any other year without treatment. So hopefully, as the treatment takes effect this initial year, the biomass going forward would be a lot less than it would be if nothing was done. So if nothing was done, that biomass would grow and die every year. That'll still happen this first year. But after that, with the plants under control, we'd have a lot less biomass coming back in the fall.
Is there any residual chemical that stays with that biomass and resides in the bottom of the lake and perhaps toxifies it?
Only the copper algicides have a small amount of copper that would stay in the sediments of the pond. But all the aquatic herbicides break down over time and are not present after that.
It looks pretty organic. It says that the half-life averages 17 days.
Yeah, it's different for each product, obviously, and there's a half-life in water and there's a half-life in the sediment too, which is typically longer than the half-life in water, but they all do eventually completely break down.
What impact does it have on the fish population during this half-life?
Good question. I mean, these herbicides, because they are used in lakes and ponds, and obviously nobody wants any adverse effects on the aquatic life while this treatment's going on. They've all been designed and labeled so that they won't have any effect on the fish or any other critters in the pond when they're applied properly, you know, according to the label at the required dose. So there wouldn't be any effect on the fish.
On any kind of fish, or are there certain specific fish or reptiles that might be more prone to exposure?
No, I mean, during the testing process, they typically will test on the most sensitive species, like, you know, trout, and, you know, they'll also look at some of the, you know, zooplankton in the water. So, I mean, really the margin of safety applies to all types of aquatic life in the pond. So,
What time of year do you plan to apply?
you know, it's going to probably end up being sometime in June, I would say, but, you know, it's based on a pre-treatment inspection of the pond to gauge how far along the plants are. You know, we need them to have their rosettes floating in order for the foliar treatment to work, but, you know, we don't want to wait till August or September, because the water chestnut specifically is an annual plant. It grows back from seeds every year, not root system. So this initial year of treatment, it's very important to treat the plants before they form and drop seeds, so that we can get that first year and don't have that additional seed bank. There's a seed bank down in the bottom of the pond. I mean, these plants have been here for a while. So, I mean, there are seeds that have not germinated, so we do expect there to be a fair amount of regrowth in year 2, but it'll be quickly reducing down, you know, over a period of 2 to 3 years, where we may be able to get down to a point where, you know, a 2-man crew in less than a day could, you know, go around and pick some of the scattered regrowth.
I was going to ask, because I've worked on hand-pulling projects of water chestnut, and I mean, that's a viable alternative, so I'm taking it that the infestation here is larger than
Yes.
is viable from a hand-pulling operation.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, over a period of, you know, like I said, a few years, we can, with the herbicides, we can usually get it down to the point where it is feasible to do more of a manual removal.
So would you kind of report back to us that, you know, maybe you'd use herbicide for 2 or 3 years, and then in the last 2 years you'd be hand-pulling or something?
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly be happy to provide the commission with a, you know, a report at the end of every year. Kind of summarize what we did and what's expected for the upcoming year.
June, I would guess June isn't such a big time period for birds, migratory birds or anything like that. Are there any concerns from
When you read the literature, I mean, it makes it sound kind of benign. I
Yeah.
don't really have a lot of experience with actual health.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of the most closely regulated pesticide industry, you know, areas. I mean, because you're treating water. I mean, it's you know, much more stringent than some of the upland or, you know, applications for herbicides.
The same stuff you used on Stevie's Pond, right?
Only limited there. They
No,
used
we did.
algicide largely.
We
in
used the
Stevens
copper
Pond.
algicides there, and I believe we used some different herbicides, Sonar, Fluridone. So now there are some different herbicides here, but you know, the work at the Brooks School, I think, used
Hasn't
some of
happened
the
yet, but-
some of the different types of herbicides as well from Stevens Pond. But again, these are all fall under, you know, the aquatics category. They've all been reviewed on, again, multiple levels at the federal and the state regulatory agencies, and we do have to apply and obtain that other permit from DEP. So this process and these products have been reviewed a number of times. So.
Is there any follow-up water testing that is routine that verifies that the proper dose was applied?
Not necessarily. I mean, we usually do follow-up testing when there are some uses of the pond that would be restricted, like for irrigation or drinking, which really hardly anybody does anywhere anymore from, you know, surface water ponds that aren't reservoirs. And so we are planning to do some water quality monitoring, you know, on an annual basis as well, to kind of keep track of some of the nutrients and water quality in the pond. But, you know, I mean, these herbicides, I mean, we basically use a volume calculation for the pond, and we know exactly how much to put in. So, I mean, and assuming that the treatment works but there's no required follow-up
If all goes
monitoring.
well, right?
We've been doing this for a long time.
know,
Yeah,
yeah.
we know
I know,
pretty
yeah.
well. I mean, we've been out. A survey was done by Matt last fall, so he went out and measured water depths, right in the pond. So we know we're not relying on antiquated information on the volume of the pond. So we do have updated information on
Include the
it.
water quality information in your annual report to the commission?
Sure. Yep.
I have no more questions.
Any effect on humans?
No.
And when you apply it, are you going to be having any signs or anything, stay away?
Yep.
For certain?
Yeah, we're required by DEP to put up signs around the shoreline of the pond, warning of the temporary use restrictions. Now, as a kind of a token to how the safety margins that are in, there's actually no restrictions on the labels for these products for swimming. But we do close, not that anybody swims in this pond, but we do post that there's no swimming, fishing, or boating on the day of the actual treatment. And then the labeled use restrictions are in irrigation, drinking, and livestock watering. Those would be posted on those signs as well. But it's our understanding that the pond's not used for any of those purposes. But we still have to post.
Okay. And how long would that last then?
We're probably, with the way these particular herbicides are set up, we're probably going to put, just on the signs that, do not use. I mean, this pond water should not be used for any of those purposes, because they do require testing of the amounts of the herbicide left in order to lift any particular restriction if there was someone using it for irrigation. So in the cases where we know that those uses aren't applicable here, we just usually put "do not use" on the signs, so that people
those
know
signs
not.
will be in place then for how long?
The probably would be probably like usually a month or so after.
And
the
then you'll
treatment.
take them down?
Yes.
Okay,
We'll.
thank you.
So along the discussion of your water quality testing that Jack was talking about,
Yep.
I think that it would be prudent to have a test done before you do anything to establish a baseline for the water quality,
Okay.
and then we'd have something to actually compare it to,
Yep. That sounds reasonable.
which I think we can condition. But then when you're making your reporting, we have something to look at.
Okay, so a pre and a post.
Pre and post, and however many tests you do during, it'll just give us, testing without a baseline to me is kind of silly.
True. Yeah, no doubt.
You think
I mean, we
about
don't
the scientists,
expect the treatment itself. We do hope over a longer period of time to eventually have a reduction in phosphorus. But I mean, in terms of the other water quality parameters, I mean, they shouldn't have, the treatments themselves shouldn't have any specific effect on the water quality.
Okay, Mike, all set.
Okay. Any more questions? Motion to continue?
So moved.
Second.
You didn't find that, I checked for a DEP number at like 3 o'clock, I didn't see anything.
Yeah, actually, I talked with Jim Freely. There must have been some mix-up in the mail. He said he hadn't even received it yet, so we're actually going to resend that out tomorrow morning, and I emailed it to him as well, so
Okay.
I would
so we'll-
expect it should be
Next
soon.
meeting will be good, 2:25?
Yeah, we'll check in with you before the next meeting. I mean, if it's, I don't know if we need, we can talk about whether we need to be here or not. I mean, it's up to
Okay.
you. Thank you.
So motion and seconded, do we vote?
Yep,
Who voted
I
second?
seconded.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Thank you.
No, first.
Next one is 242-1630, 350.
Randy's here from,
Okay.
and John Moran's not here from, the other project. Right, so,
Well, we can still do it without them, because we're gonna,
Night, Greg.
we're gonna recommend to continue anyways based on planning. Or do
he's
you wanna-
coming though, so I don't want to hear it before
Okay.
he gets here. I think we should go back to the
All
airport
right,
if that's
very
okay.
good. All right, because I have, so Doug, this is yours.
Okay, let's see, we're going to be hearing 242-1642, 492 Sutton Street, the Lawrence Municipal Airport.
So, As requested at the last meeting, this is a discussion of the EMAS system alternative.
I didn't ruin anybody's schedule. Between the MBTA and snow removal on the pike, it's a mess out there. So, well, it cost me a couple hours that I wasn't thinking about. Well, I'm gonna have to do this. Well, good evening. My name is Randy Christensen, and as said, this was a continuance of the hearing to discuss. To discuss an alternative that was brought up at the last hearing, and this alternative is the project is a runway safety area project. We have deficient overrun, undershoot turf areas at the crosswind runway at Lawrence Airport, and the runway safety areas that we had proposed in the notice of intent were standard turf safety areas, and their length of 240 feet. By 120 feet in width, which is a standard specified by the FAA for the type of airport that Lawrence is. And a comment was made regarding the use of engineered material arresting systems, or EMAS. And engineered material arresting systems, and it was a good comment, because when FAA talks about a safety area project or is funding a safety area project, one of the mandates is that EMAS be considered as one of the alternatives in addition to several others. And what we presented in the meantime was just a short discussion on EMAS, and what I want to present to you tonight was something, just a reiteration of what I had said at the first hearing, is that because of the utility type and the utility level at Lawrence Municipal Airport, EMAS doesn't become a viable alternative. But I wanted to explain that further with things that we submitted after the last hearing and in plans that I brought with me tonight. Again, engineered material arrestor system. So instead of relying solely on length of soil and turf to slow down an aircraft, should it land long or abort takeoff or what have you, we're relying on actual length of turf and soil, just enough room to let that plane slow down and avoid injury to passengers or damage to the aircraft. And as I had said last time, and is incorporated in the notice of intent, FAA put their thinking cap on and did not apply a safety area design to a Logan Airport, a higher design utility airport, to that of something like a Lawrence or even lesser, where it's mainly a single engine prop plane type runway on the crosswind runway at Lawrence. And so what they do is they assign airport reference codes to different utilities of airport depending on what type of aircraft are using that airport. And Lawrence becomes what's called a B2 airport reference code. In comparison, something like a Logan would be a D category airport reference code, one of the highest, or the highest letter code of the airport reference code scale. And for a B2 category runway, we require, like I said, a 240-foot length by 120-foot width turf safety area. For a comparison, again, going to a D airport, we're into a 1,000-foot width, 1,000-foot length of safety area by 500 feet in width for your D category and even your C category airports. So you can see more than 3 times the length needed because we're into commercial jet aircraft at that point with much longer wingspans, much higher approach speeds, et cetera, in comparison to the typical prop planes and some of the higher level prop planes that you see using the crosswind runway at Lawrence. And engineered material arrestor system, all it does is compact the length of your system so that if you don't have the room to put your 1,000 feet of turf and soil safety area in, you're constrained by property lines, wetlands. At Logan, they were constrained by the actual open water of the ocean. Those are the things that will constrain length of putting a full safety area in. And so they will turn to an engineered material arrestor system, which lets you reduce the overall length of your safety area system by having engineered, collapsible, concrete type material blocks. And what these do is they collapse as the weight of the nose wheel hits them, just like a runway truck ramp with the loose stone, kind of the same type of engineering. But these are much more technologically advanced, these blocks. They have differential widths as you go up the ramp, and they are designed for your critical aircraft at your airport. Now, once they're used, they have to be replaced. So once the blocks are broken, which has happened at Logan right after they built it, and Worcester Airport has one too. Those are the two closest that I know to this actual area. Driving on it is verboten. You break it, the whole EMAS bed has to be replaced. And so it's a very technologically advanced system and a very expensive system, but it's a lot less expensive than trying to extend a landmass into the ocean, into wetlands, into rare species territory, etc., which is why they're typically used. Now, as I said, at a B2 runway, which is a fairly low-level airport reference code, we need a much smaller safety area. And as is in the notice of intent, the current plans, we were able to fit that 240-foot length by 120-foot width at the end of runway 32, but it encroached within the 25-foot bylaw buffer. And so we wanted to see if an EMAS application here at the runway 32 end might allow for shortening that distance and actually provide better buffer from the wetlands. So let me basic components of an EMAS bed. Here's your runway end. There's always a lead-in to before you start your concrete blocks. There's always a lead-in length. That lead-in length for a C or a D type airport where we have significant jet blast which can damage the blocks, can actually be pretty significant before you even get to the EMAS bed. Narrowest you can have is about 35 feet. And since we don't have jet blast associated with this particular runway end, we put the minimum 35-foot lead-in off of the runway end. The bed itself is designed based upon a design aircraft. Now, the complication here is that EMAS design is typically for planes with a minimum full capacity load of 12,500 pound single wheel loading. Our design aircraft for the crosswind runway at Lawrence doesn't weigh that much. So we're already into a little bit, because of our design aircraft on the crosswind, we're already in a little bit of a hassle in that EMAS really isn't designed for the light aircraft that is the design aircraft for this runway. So what we did was just assumed the minimum length EMAS bed acceptable in the regulations to apply to our design aircraft for the crosswind runway at Lawrence. So lead-in area, and then there is a stepped block. It goes up. There's a slope up on the blocks, and then it can go down at the end. It is set on a bed of pavement. Hot mix asphalt is typically used, so it's not set right on ground surface or compacted gravel or anything like that. And so there is a bed of typical 6-inch layer of hot mix asphalt underlaying your EMAS bed. And also to the sides, and this is it in cross section, purple in the plan view, we actually need steps going up to the EMAS bed because its whole purpose is an aircraft accident, to contain an aircraft accident. Well, we need ways for actual safety personnel to get up to that accident should the EMAS bed be used. And so surrounding the entire EMAS bed is a series of steps, typically two-foot steps getting up onto the EMAS bed, which adds about 8 feet in width to the entire system. And so that's in a nutshell. Lead-in, the block, set on a paved surface, and your steps off to the side of the EMAS bed, allowing for that access by safety personnel. So what I did was, and what actually our aviation planner did, not me, is we superimposed what the minimum EMAS bed design would be onto the same plan that we have currently for the runway 32 end. And so here in this plan, there's a line showing where our standard runway safety area, turf safety area, 240 feet by 120, would fit in this design. And the overall shadow is the area encompassed by your minimum EMAS bed that you could actually apply at this runway end. This comes out to be about 320 feet in length by about 128 feet in width. The EMAS bed itself, the 35 feet plus it was 35 plus 285 of worth of actual concrete block bed. The width has to be 100 feet for the blocks, but then we have that steps on either side, which add about 4 feet to either side, so 8 feet total. But then we have to have 10 feet of pavement. The bed itself has to extend out beyond the EMAS bed as well, just for support vehicles, so they have something to actually drive on next to the EMAS bed. So that gives us about 128-foot width. on the EMAS bed. So you can see in this situation, for a B2 runway, any B2 runway, your minimum size EMAS bed actually is larger than your typical soil and turf runway safety area. And so it would be a very rare situation, and I don't know of any, and I know there's none in Massachusetts or the Northeast. It'd be a very rare situation that you would find an EMAS bed for a B runway. We have them for C runways in New England, and I know of 2 D runways, again, within about a 50-mile radius of here that have them. Worcester Airport has one for their crosswind runway, and Logan certainly has a high-level EMAS bed there as well. In fact, are they working on a second at Logan? They might be. There's one that they're doing, and I think there's one they're actually planning on as well.
There are two in operation.
There are 2 there.
There's actually a third planning, and they were also in the planning stage for Hanscom.
Hanscom was trying to do one at the runway 23 end, and they, I was actually involved in that. They actually were able to do a standard safety area for Hanscom on their crosswind anyway. So fortunately, and it's the expense that really gets you on the EMAS systems. Not only the replacement, it needs to be replaced every 20 years, but it needs a specialized snow blower. You can't plow it with a vehicle. You actually have to get up there with it can be one of those one-man riding snow blowers, but it's a very specialized snow blower sold by the EMAS company, that needs to be purchased along with the EMAS, so it cannot be plowed by the regular maintenance equipment at the airport. So there's a lot of things inherent to EMAS beds which makes them tricky, which makes them expensive, but in the long run, 1,000 feet's a long way. We're talking a quarter-mile worth of work at the end of your runway. In New England, think of an area, for these big airports where you have a quarter mile of free land at the end of your runway. In those situations, you can get away with 500 and 600 feet as opposed to 1,000 with land costs and things like that. EMAS becomes a very, very practical alternative. And something like this with B2, you can see even with the minimum design, it becomes a kind of a non-starter right away. And one other thing, we're fortunate that for turf safety areas, the safety area design allowed by FAA allows a constant downslope on a turf safety area. EMAS beds have to be placed on a level piece of pavement, and then the blocks actually go up a little bit. You'll notice on an EMAS bed the blocks actually increase in height, and so the grading associated with a EMAS bed travels a lot further out to the ends and out to the sides because it's more of a raised system as opposed to a standard turf one where you can have about a 2 to 5% downgrade right from the start on your turf area. So that in a nutshell, and it's good to have for an alternatives analysis, but that in a nutshell is the complications with EMAS here at Lawrence at a B2 utility runway. And again, if it was a C or a D, EMAS would be an automatic consideration. But for B2s, it's a very difficult sell. And so that in a nutshell is my presentation on EMAS. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on it.
All right, Sean?
I arrived at your presentation, the tail end of your presentation last time, but why is this being done now? Why is there looking for this improvement to the runway at this point in time?
There is federal mandate for safety area improvements at all federally participating airports in the United States, and this is not a Massachusetts thing. It's supposed to be done by 2015. They arrived on all of the airports in the United States on their capital improvement plan, and the GA airports, those non-commercial, non-Part 139, which is your charter planes, your commercial planes, they all got the money first, and then the general aviation airports like Lawrence and below were last in line to get the safety area money. So you're seeing a slew of the GA airports in line to do their safety area work here right at the tail end of the federal mandate.
Is one alternative to make runway 32 shorter?
And we did, for the system that we have put in place, we have shortened the runway pavement enough so that there was no direct wetland impacts associated with the safety area. So yes, we made a combination of things in order to do a wetland avoidance with the safety area at the 3-2 end.
So how close to the wetland is your proposed grass 240, 120?
Right now, we are going almost right up to the wetland boundary at this end, and it's basically going from an existing turf area right up to the wetland boundary. It will be turf when it's done. but we had to change the grades in order to get our safety area slope. We also had to change the grades to get our water back into our new stormwater system so that we can get treatment of all the water running off of our new surfaces. So it is turf now. It'll be turf later, post-construction, but we do change the grades from a kind of a steeper slope, and we're taking that slope and flattening it out.
So how much shortening of the runway is happening here?
We shortened that runway by, I should have that off the top of my head, but I don't.
From the last presentation, there's
245
this
feet?
significant reduction in impervious area associated with the
Is
construction.
that what was, Al?
I'm looking, well, I'm looking at your NOI on the notice of intent, original project 3,900 feet, revised project 3,655.
Yeah,
It's
that's-
for a loss of 245
45
feet. Does
feet
that
of
make
runway.
sense to the question?
It does. I do have it on my notice of intent, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm just taking that, Randy, from page 3 of, page 3 of the introduction, actually. 1.0, page 3. The delta is negative 245. I guess you have to go to 1.0. At least that's what it looks like.
And I apologize for covering ground that you guys
Oh,
already
that's all
covered.
right, my memory used to be a lot better. Yeah, it's 245 feet.
245, all right, so we do have
And
the right.
there's no practicality in trying to lessen it, shorten it more to,
Well,
for further avoidance?
there is, it'd be another big leap, and what we have is, we have existing lighting systems here right at the runway end. Very critical end lighting for the existing runway end, and then we have exact spacing of runway lights going all the way down to the other end. We would have to jump by another magnitude of those lights to avoid having to replace the entire electrical system along both sides of the runway. So what we did was we shortened it to where that span got us out of the wetland and allowed us to maintain the existing lighting system along the run. There's the reasoning. Also, eating up more runway
Limits
to
the type
provide
of
safety
aircraft.
area, you're taking away safety to give safety. We tried to strike a balance here.
And what kind of aircraft is landing on this?
The biggest critical aircraft is called a Beech King Air, and a King Air 100 or a King Air 400 is actually a turboprop.
Yep.
You know, a turboprop, it's like an 8-seater.
Yep.
That's the biggest. Mostly we're talking about Cessna 172s. That's going to be 90% of your operations is going to be the single. Now on the B2 main runway, citations, we do have corporate jets, quite a bit corporate jet aircraft operations. On this one, they're only used when the wind is howling down the crosswind. That's the only time the jets can actually use the crosswind because of its current length. By shortening it, we're even jeopardizing that more. So the corporate jet aircraft are almost always going to be on the main runway unless we have a wind favoring 1432 so much that that headwind counteracts the shortness of the actual runway for a corporate jet. But for this, the Beech King Air, it's a pretty friendly aircraft. So we're talking about a rainy summer day. Heat and humidity hurt us for runway length. Rain, certainly for stopping distance. That's where a Beech King Air starts to get critical on this particular asphalt. A day like today where it's dry and cold and maybe wind favoring this, you get a lot of different aircraft landing on this.
Thanks, I don't have any other questions at this point.
Hi, Randy. I have a couple, Mr. Chairman, if you would. I guess the first question I have is, and it's not something that you did, it's the FAA calling it a safety area.
Yep.
How does the safety area stop an airplane?
Only by providing length, all right? So you have touchdown aim points.
Yep.
You have paintings and markings where aircraft are supposed to touch down
Yep.
or supposed to be taken off by, all right? And by the time they get to those points, they're either at a critical speed. On takeoff, they've reached approach speed, not approach speed, they've reached takeoff speed. By the time, you know, they're halfway down the runway or 3/4. So to abort that at that point, there's a point where there's not enough runway left for them to abort takeoff. These are the kind of situations where a safety area or a land short, they're aiming for the threshold bars and land short and things like that. It's just extra compact area right around these critical areas that if there is a mistake or an environmental hazard or a deer run across a runway, these are all situations that have happened that if they abort or land short, there's something there. It's not an automatic death if they can't stay on the runway environment.
But the distance of your proposed, because the reason we're having this conversation is because you need a waiver. You've got a waiver request for the work. And I'm concentrating on runway 32 for obvious reasons, because that's the area where there is the most potential collateral damage to buildings, roadways, and non-flying pedestrians. In fact, runway 32 has been the scene of numerous overruns and crashes. The building that's located at 1050 Osgood Street was burnt to the ground by a Cessna 172 that overran runway 32 and made its way all the way through the woods, through the parking lot, and into the building, and indeed burnt it to the ground. May 31st, 2012, another airplane went off the end of runway 32 and made it to within 25 feet of Route 125. It's a very critical area, so I don't disagree with you when you say that some type of safety system and device is needed. I don't disagree at all. My question is, and I know you understand what I'm asking, you can extend it 245 feet, you can make it more level, you can give that extra 245 feet. It's not pavement, it's grass. Even if the pilot is on the binders, that's not a lot of area to stop an airplane. Even if it's only a lowly little 172, it's going to be hard to stop it, let alone something bigger like a Beechcraft twin. This was the reason why I initially suggested the EMAS. They actually stop airplanes. It stops an airplane. I know it's expensive. I understand. It's not lost on me what we're talking about. But to grade and fill and level an area beyond runway 32, in my mind, is just giving the airplane a flatter area to launch back into the building at 1050 Osgood. It's a very short distance to 1050 from where you are, and it's already been hit once.
We are moving the actual regulated flying environment quite a bit of ways from those.
So you're taking it 245 feet.
We are.
Which goes to my next question. When you talked about the length of an EMAS bed system and how it would, in your design, you show how it would potentially encroach. You don't have to put it that far back. You could move it that 245 feet up and move the numbers up and get the full benefit of the bed without encroaching back into the area. According to the EMAS expert that I had conversation with where I work, the location of the EMAS bed is the best location practicable. It's not a mandated hard and fast spot. You as an engineer could approximate where you want it. So let me see if I'm trying to go fast, Randy, so I don't keep us here all night. So where you have in figure 2, where you have runway 32 EMAS, which is what you have there, you could take that bed and, quite frankly, move it the 245 feet to the left and get it completely out of that area.
So right now it stops right here.
Yeah, you could take
edge.
your whole model and move that whole model all the way to the left, up onto the paved area.
Thus moving the numbers and the lights and everything, and shortening the runway.
By 100 or 150 or 200 feet, the sacrifice to me would be insignificant compared to the fact that you'd have something now that can actually stop an airplane from heading towards Route 125 and the buildings that are right there. I mean, I'm sure that, in fact, on your model, you even show the location, the proximity of the building.
Yeah, it's right there.
Right there. That building is already burnt to the ground once from a very small airplane. And the story behind that airplane is even more horrifying. That airplane wasn't landing. The pilot got out of the damn thing while it was running, and it took off on its own. And it made it through everything.
Goes to show you.
But I guess my point is, what your proposal, which I agree, your proposal is attempting to comply with the FAA reg. I get it. But the FAA reg, in my humble opinion, is got a flaw in it, in that it's just simply leveling off an area to make it easier for an aircraft. Yes, one side would say, well, we're giving that aircraft more room to stop. I'm saying you're making it easier for that aircraft to keep going.
And we're coming at it from opposite sides here. You're
Well,
trying to
I'm
protect
saying
the off-property and off-environment.
I'm saying stop the airplane, because you got innocents out there that have nothing to do with airplanes you know, dropping off their cleaning and buying ice cream and just driving up and down the road. Which is why I'm fixated on this end of the runway, because I've seen it happen. I went on Google tonight to try to get a history of the crashes, but of course I couldn't get it. But the most recent one was May 31st of 12, and it was the same runway, same situation. I'm just simply suggesting, I'm not trying to hurt Lawrence Airport. I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm not trying to be punitive. But if we're going to really, really key on safety, we got to look at something that will stop an airplane. Not just give it more area to try to stop, and not make a nicer parking area for fire trucks and ambulances and everything else, because that's what basically we're creating with the proposed safety area. We're just leveling off the area to make it easier for everybody to work on. I note on your
The loading for the 172s takes that discussion to a whole new level, that 172s are not heavy enough
Yeah.
to actually break through an EMAS bed.
There is something else. You talked about in your memo of January 23rd, you talked about Order 5200.8, the alternatives to be considered.
Yes.
And it directs basically an order of alternatives, and it talks about relocating, shifting, or realignment of the runway, reduction of the runway length where the existing runway length exceeds that which is required for the existing or projected design aircraft. We don't know what the required aircraft is for the design aircraft. I suspect this runway's
We
bigger
know
than
what the length is supposed to be. It's supposed to be 80% of your length of your
So
main
talk
runway.
about a Beechcraft, which would be the big, you're talking about, that Beechcraft Twin is probably the biggest model you're talking about here.
King Air.
The King Air. So the King Air needs what? I'm pretty sure there's more runway there than the King Air needs already, which is why you're not afraid to shorten it as it is. You're shortening on both ends.
One reason we're not afraid to shorten it this end is because we have obstructions between the street lights and everything like that already has a displaced threshold for takeoff, or I'm sorry, for landing at this end anyway.
Yeah.
The structure's in there. So we're losing distance for takeoff at this end, but fortunately not for landing.
You're losing it at the other end too, though.
Yeah, we shortened.
You're taking it off at the other end
yeah,
also, the same thing.
because we ran out of property line at that end.
And the other one, I mean, like I said, the other one to me is even more scary because it drops. The airplane that goes off that thing is going to be able to start flying again for a little bit because it's got a drop off there.
But the 240 feet that they specify for B2s is
Yeah.
certainly not an arbitrary number. They've
Yeah.
they've analyzed all the accidents that have happened for that type of utility runway,
Yeah.
and what they aimed for was trying to arrest 80% of those accidents with some type of area. So another 20%, which would include two of the ones that you talked about, would fall outside of that zone they're actually trying to create.
If something were there to stop those, and I'm only talking about two. There's been more than two. I just simply don't have the data, so I'm not going to talk.
And
it.
I don't either.
And you know, believe me, I tried to get it. But that end of the runway, 3-2 is really my concern, honestly. And that end of the runway is where the most potential is and the most history is for absolute damage. And like I said, when that building burnt, it didn't just burn a little bit. It went right to the ground. And it was a big building. It's a strip mall. And there's got to be some way that to stop, to arrest. I mean, if we're going to call it a safety area, let's make it a safety area. Let's not just make it a launching pad.
It surprises me, and we need safety area at this end. All four runways require it. However, on the crosswind, typically planes are coming down here, taking off towards, is that Methuen across the river? They're taking off towards the big yellow condos and Methuen at the other end.
Sure.
This is actually landing. They come in over Cochituate, and this is actually more of a landing end.
Yeah.
So I'm really surprised that they had
Yeah,
two
the-
overruns in this direction, because it's very rare that they're coming in from the 1-4 end.
And they were both small Cessnas. They weren't big airplanes. And like I said, the most recent one was in May of 12. The building burner was probably about 15 years ago. I don't have the exact date.
It predates me at Lawrence. I don't remember that one. But,
Brand new strip mall there because of it. Let me go back to the solutions. So it talked about, after the reduction, it says a combination of runway reduction, shifting, grading, realignment, or reduction, and then use of declared distances, and then lastly, you have use of engineered material arresting systems. Also, the one thing that's not listed there that the FAA Boston told me they can do is restrict aircraft by size based on the distance they need, which is an alternative, and which you talked about. Your bigger G7s and things are not going to land on 3-2.
No.
Unless, I mean, that's an emergency if they're landing on 3-2.
Yeah.
or even trying to take off.
The distance required for a King Air is much different than for a 172 Cessna, right? Huge.
They are. Yeah, King Air is bigger, twin engine, heavier.
Turboprop.
That's why I talk about the critical
But it still
aircraft.
gets right up there, though. I mean,
But the 172s, you know, that's for a single engine plane. It's a pretty strong one, you know,
Yep.
and it's a common one,
Yep.
and that's why we talk about the Cessna
that
172s
is the
a
common
lot.
plane there, no question, and that's the exact model in each of those accidents that went off the end and just continued to march. I feel that, you know, I recognize what you're doing, I understand you're complying with FAA, but, I mean, if we're gonna really be serious about a safety area, let's make it a safety area, because honestly, Randy, that's a launching pad we're building right there.
And I don't agree with Al, and we're allowed to disagree with each other. I've done a lot of these. I know the reg real well. I know what they're trying to do here. I know what to try to encompass that additional 20% safety or whatever it is to catch, you know, at least in all their studies that they did nationwide, to create a safety area for a B2 airport that encompasses everything. I think Al would be 100% correct. But try to capture 90%, 95%, there's that point of diminishing returns. This is the design criteria they give us as aviation engineers, and I guess to some extent FAA is our boss a little bit in our design of such things at an FAA certified airport. We're also coming at it from different directions. If you look at a safety area definition, it is to protect the pilot and the aircraft. Al's coming at it from the other side, protecting people, you know, off the other end, which certainly is certainly a righteous reason. What I have behind me is the weight and what it says in the actual FAA design criteria.
Well, you do have the discretionary authority to move that bed. The bed doesn't have to go where you've laid it out. That bed can go up the runway.
Yeah, we can keep eating up runway.
You could eat it up. You wouldn't be taking up so much runway that you'd be wiping out the airplanes that need it.
Would it wipe out the King Air?
We are already, for our crosswind runway, substandard below what a crosswind is supposed to be lengthwise relative to your main runway. So by having a main runway of 5,000 feet, which is what 523 is at Lawrence, you're inviting a certain type of aircraft to use your airport. So they want your crosswind to be 80% length of your main runway. Should, for whatever reason, a plane coming in all of a sudden can't use the main, he has 80%. And in most situations, 80% is enough that a plane capable of using 5,000 feet, in most situations, is going to be able to use that crosswind in perfect weather conditions, et cetera, et cetera. There's times he's not going to be able to. But
when that can't happen,
probability is
Randy,
there.
then they go to another airport. I mean, you know, you make it sound like this is an aircraft
No,
carrier.
but I'm telling, but the FAA design criteria, it's 80%. You're supposed to be that. We're already substandard for that. For saying eat up more runway to provide more safety area.
You're substandard by 245
yeah,
feet.
and we'd be going further. We'd be eating up more.
You could move it enough so that it didn't encroach as much as it does. Even if you only moved it 100 feet, you could still do it. It would work. It would be the best alternative. It would be the most viable and feasible alternative. There is, I guess what I'm suggesting is there is an alternative to the proposal. It may not be palatable to the airport commission, but it is an alternative.
And I don't think it's a viable alternative because EMAS concrete or EMAS blocks are not designed for the lightweight of the most common aircraft using your crosswind, which again, that 172 is the
You don't think
aircraft
the
I keep
172
bringing
would
up.
crush those blocks?
I don't.
I just.
And I'd be happy to talk to your FAA source and have this discussion with him because there's a reason you don't have EMAS beds at B2 airports, and that's your main reason.
I think the reason is because the B2 airports have probably lobbied the FAA to say, hey, don't make us put them in.
No, in fact, the EMAS manufacturers are the ones who lobbied FAA to make us do these alternatives for EMAS beds, even when we know they're not suitable, you know, like at a B2 airport here at Lawrence.
I just have a question. I'm in a butter, so I can't vote on this or have any, but I just have, I'm pretty close. I'm probably closer than a lot of people. I own buildings there. I agree with you most of the time, because I'm there all the time. I very, very seldom see planes landing the
We have
opposite
Windrose
way.
data that supports that.
That
how
data
many
would, that
times they
big
go
data
the other
might be
direction.
helpful, moving, you know, to give the commission maybe so they know that this, you know, what. But most of the time when I'm there, the planes are taking off there.
Yeah, 3-2 and from
Yeah.
3-2 to 1-4.
Yeah.
Most of the time when I'm there too.
Can you restrict King Airs from using that runway?
And we use the King Air as the design aircraft because it had, upwards of 500 ops a year, which is extremely low. Again, 95% of the operations on this particular runway are 172s. The King Air really isn't, I don't think any of the aircraft are posing a threat, but we just mentioned the King Air because it's the most demanding aircraft to use the crosswind at a number of operations that FAA considers to be sufficient. So the King Air is not I'm there all the time. I don't see a lot of King Air operations. There only has to be 500 for it to be considered the critical aircraft. Again, on that crosswind, I'm seeing Cessnas.
Yes, and you've got 3,700 feet of runway that's open to be used.
Right, I mean-
3,700 feet. The Cessna is maybe using at best half that.
And that's kind of where my focus is on the wetlands, and you're asking for a waiver. So,
We're not impacting any wetlands directly. I want to restate that just in case
no, I
that
get- yeah.
isn't in the conversation.
but you're getting within the buffer zone to it, and which requires a waiver. And that's why the whole alternatives analysis comes up. So even if you were to stick with the grass design that you have proposed, can you get that outside of our buffer zone?
If we had to, we would probably I know the palatability of shortening that runway anymore to provide that safety area is very low on all sides. Lawrence Municipal Airport, FAA, MassDOT, et cetera. Again, because we're already under our 80% criteria. And so I'd have to look at the amount of grading we're actually doing there and see if I can just leave it in its present condition.
And Jen, is it a 50-foot,
25.
25 foot?
There's no structure proposed, it's only
Right, so it's
grading.
25 feet.
So they're in both the 50 and the 25, but it's completely devoid of natural vegetation up to the edge of the wetland. They have that under their vegetation management plan, which they permitted with us some time ago. They clear right up, almost right up to the edge of the wetland in most locations. That's how it exists now, and that's how it would exist under new conditions.
What would happen is where we took this steep slope right here, we flattened it out, we brought those grades up to make a gentler slope in there. That's where we would get in trouble with the 25 foot. So we'd have to look at something about leaving this like it is and seeing if I can fit my safety area in there without doing it. We tried to offset that request for a waiver. We certainly didn't take it lightly by significant pavement reduction with this. Significant upgrade of to tell you the truth, a drainage system that has no BMPs with it right now, and we're putting quite a few stormwater BMPs in there with this proposal.
We have photos, right, from the last time you gave me a whole.
Yeah, we had some.
But you could though, Rick. You could pull it away.
We could do a lot of
You
things.
could pull it away and you'd still accomplish what you need.
And that 80%
We're shortening runway to provide safety area. I think it's a zero balance.
We remove all
Wouldn't be surprised.
this over here.
Yep.
And then
I mean, our issue is the wetland.
pictures are the
And
best.
the thing is, it's
The
not.
vegetation and, oh yeah. So this is what it looks like now, but you can see the steep
Yeah, then-
drop.
Yeah.
They would level this back. This is the wetland
And I
right
think
down.
So it would be
They want to add, they want
They
to
would
add
just
soil.
be- No, they're gonna take away soil.
Or they're going to grade down?
They're gonna
Yeah.
grade down.
Yeah.
It's a cut more than anything.
Cut, okay, got
Is
it.
that, so that's how the, that grass area ends? It ends sloping downward?
Big fill slope, like 6 feet tall. And just to, along this slope right now, this contour right here is about a 142. And so there's about a half-foot change. I mean, it literally is a kind of a topsoiling exercise. We want to try to get this so that it's peaked in the middle, so we get water shed into either side. We also want to shed water into this stormwater collection system so we can actually treat it before it gets back into the wetland. So the grading has safety area purposes, but all this grading in total has more stormwater purposes, just trying to get it into our stormwater system. Right now it's kind of haphazard drainage. It's kind of real flat, doesn't kind of go anywhere. So it really is, if you start looking at the existing contours versus the proposed, it really is almost a topsoiling operation in order to get these grades that we need to shed that water.
And that 80% you were referencing, it must not be a line in the sand, no
No,
pun
it is not.
intended, it's a guideline.
Yeah, advisory circular versus a regulation. Still in the FAA books, but you're right.
Thanks again.
Again, we're just trying to strike that balance.
I guess, I mean, I just, my position's gonna be what it is. He can move the bed, just like he can pull the line back. He has discretion, and the bed will actually work as a safety device. It'll actually stop the airplanes, I think.
Oh, well, it'll stop at 172.
I think it will. I think it will. I don't think a
Pretty light.
170.
It is pretty light here.
You know something, it's a pretty light aircraft, okay, but it's still, you, I see the EMAS beds in use every day.
At Logan Airport, which
At
is a
Logan
D
Airport.
utility
Different
airport.
airplanes at Logan Airport.
Don't kid yourself. You think only 172s are landing and taking off here?
I have no
in that-
idea what
Well, go over to that little restaurant,
lands
sit
there
there
and
for a
takes
half
off
a day and have coffee and watch what comes and goes. And you'll understand that, yeah, it's easy to talk about and reference a 172, but they're landing and taking off bigger aircraft.
But our issue is primarily the wetlands,
Well,
not,
that's-
not the safety of the butters.
Only the-
So that's the reason why we're discussing the alternatives to,
But I don't,
Approach.
personally, I don't think that what's being proposed has any more adverse effect on the wetlands than what already exists.
well,
That's my opinion.
if you're gonna impact the wetlands at all, including issuing a waiver, the waiver should have some value. Grading the hill, you might as well just put a rope across it like you would on an aircraft carrier. That's about as much as you're doing.
Arrestor cable. Yeah.
Sure.
All right, do we have any other questions or comments?
Is there any
Jack?
change in maintenance practices from current to the new proposed safety area?
Safety areas, where right now, they probably don't, but we can't have the snow berm off the end of the runway, so they wouldn't be able to, so they'd have to be flat there at the end of the runway during like snow events like this. And that would be it. It's gonna be turf when it's done,
Maybe the snow would
mowed the
actually
same,
help. Big snow.
so no, there's no requirement.
Did you give me do I have an O&M?
For the, you do for
Well,
the
you
catch
did it-
basins and things, but not for the
Right, not
safety
for,
area.
okay.
It would just be mowed the same frequency and everything they're doing right now. So no.
No difference.
We discussed,
That's all I-
it actually doesn't have to meet the stormwater requirements because they're not proposing, they're removing impervious area, not adding any. So I forgot that we had already gone through that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and since we have a net reduction with the
Net
project
reduction in
significant, we still had to, best of our ability,
Right.
to try to get TSS removal, which is what we did with our new catch basin systems and drainage systems.
Deb, do you have any questions?
questions.
All right,
Just one more.
yes, go ahead.
This is the area, this is the end of the runway here
Correct, so that's the slope,
that exists
and
now?
that's the
obviously?
wetland right there where that
Yep.
light colored grass is. So, like I said, it's nice and flat already, but we want to slope it downward. So it's this area that we're gonna be working, and that slope, that toe right there, it's gonna be dragged up, so it's one constant slope from the runway end here down to that elevation there.
Okay, so you would end up filling this area here?
No, it'd be a cut. So we
Cut.
hold that toe slope elevation,
Yep.
and we cut through that bump right there, so it's a constant downslope instead of level.
Gotcha.
And then precipitous drop.
Yep.
It would just be one level cut all the way up.
So instead of that, and then you lose all your elevation over a 6-foot area,
Yep.
we're now gonna lose all that elevation over a 200 and whatever foot area.
And just regarding the statement you made that, the EMAS wouldn't work with the weight of a 172, do you have any data to
The
support
thing I
that?
have is the FAA order 5200.9, they talk about the EMAS designs, and the runway serves one such criteria for EMAS for consideration is that the runway serves aircraft with a maximum takeoff weight of 25,000 pounds or more. So 25,000 pounds, you're getting into the sea level, the smaller corporate jets on up. We start getting into the light aircraft like this, that's where you start losing viability with the EMAS system with the lighter planes. The Cessna 172, it doesn't weigh much at all.
So the EMAS is designed for 2,500 25,000 pounds.
And the other thing is that at C and D class airports, you have a more consistent grade of aircraft using the runway. So one EMAS design serves almost all the aircraft that are using that. A lot of times your utility airports like this, for example, on the main runway there, you have Cessna 172s, a very light, small aircraft using that runway, but you also have, I don't think they have any G4s using Lawrence, but just under the size of a G4. So you have an extreme range at general aviation airports, extreme range of aircraft weights and et cetera, using that runway. And EMAS has a more specific design criteria. You're trying to design it towards a specific weight. So a lot of times your outliers start to fall out of the optimal use of the EMAS bed. Whereas when you can put a standard turf safety area in, the length is supposed to accommodate that entire aircraft class. So there's a difference there.
And they're getting away from that precipitous drop. Why? Because that ends up causing more injuries and...
That precipitous drop is part of our
occupants
safety area. It's too steep for the FAA design criteria. They allow 2% and then a maximum of 5% after a certain distance. By flattening out that whole slope, we can meet the design criteria for the slope along the entire length of the turf safety area.
Thanks again.
All right, do I hear a motion? We gotta do something regarding this.
We gotta do the waiver first.
We would actually, I mean, there is proposal to build this starting this year, starting this growing season, and pretty early in the year as well.
First would be a vote on the waiver request.
Yeah, we need to vote on the waiver. Is there a motion regarding the waiver?
I move that we grant the waiver request for 242-1642.
Is there a second?
Got Deb. Jack and Deb.
Okay, you got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed.
Opposed.
So you have to
So we
vote.
got
You
three
have
in
to vote.
favor and
Oh, three, okay.
2 opposed.
No, he just said he's in favor, so that's 3 and
It's a
2.
3-2. It's a 3-2 vote.
Okay, now we need a motion on
Now,
to close an
do I hear a
issue.
motion on the, to grant a,
I move that we close 242-1642 and issue a decision within 21 days.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous.
And again, my
Except,
opposition wasn't based upon an EMAX system. It was just keeping it 25 feet further from wetland.
Thank you. I'll give you an update as far as schedules and things like that. I'll send emails to you constantly.
Well, we won't issue till the next meeting, the
Sure.
order, and then from there we can discuss about how you're gonna
We'll
move forward.
obviously have a pre-con meeting, everything else.
Yep.
All right, thank you,
Thanks.
everyone. Good seeing you again.
Thank you.
Next one is 242-1633-51 Willow Street.
So Lisa has finished her review with this project. John, my only concern in talking to planning was you're back in front of them next week? Yep. And they had discussed something about leaving the berm and fencing that we haven't had discussions about in this hearing, so,
Yep,
okay,
I can go over that.
all right.
Good evening to the record. My name's John Moore, and I work for the Moore and Cameron Group. We're here tonight representing Muffin Realty Trust for a notice of intent application for their facility located at 351 Willow Street South, Bacon Joy. First, just want to cover a couple things that came up at the last Conservation Commission meeting. The first one being, we had just received Lisa's comments at that meeting. Since that time, we've responded back to Lisa with revised plans, and she's reviewed everything, and she's given us a clean bill of health on the revisions that were made. I'll go over the major revisions in a minute, but there was also an issue. The commission had concerns regarding a snow stockpile area that we originally had showed on the southerly end of the proposed new parking lot. It was about, I don't know, about 40 feet from the edge of the wetlands. Lisa had brought up the same issue, and we'd actually removed that entire snow stockpile area, pushed it to the westerly side of the parking lot, and it's approximately 70 feet from the edge of the wetlands in that location. A couple other minor changes that were made to the plan were actually a result of the meeting that we had with the planning board. Is when this project or this addition was built back in the late 80s, early 90s, they built a man-made berm at the rear of the property, and what you see in orange is roughly the top of that berm. And the reason for that is because of what they were using the facility for. They had reefer trucks out back that were running all the time, so you had some noise. Back in the late 90s, they got rid of that. So there was really no need for the berm anymore, but they still had it because it was there. So based on the proposal, we'd had to remove obviously the majority of the berm located where the parking lot is, and regrade portions of the berm off where the addition was going in order to make room for the fire access around the proposed addition. So what we had done is the planning board requested, is there a way to put something back to mimic that berm? And what we've done, we're actually proposing a stockade fence on the top of the grading at the back of this slope. We're able to maintain some of this grading. The original berm height elevation was roughly around elevation 271. By adding this 6-foot-high stockade fence, the top of the fence is now between elevation 270 and 274. So we're actually higher than the berm. The one issue the planning board had, they were actually all set with the project. The main reason they didn't close is because they wanted to wait to see if conservation had any additional items, because we didn't have the ability to appear back before the commission before our last meeting with planning. But what they did is they're going to leave open, we stopped the fence right here, and the reason for that is we don't feel that there was a need for any buffering in this direction. There was no big issues from any of the abutters on the other side of 125. But the planning board brought up a point that if a vehicle is coming up into this parking lot at night, could somebody traveling on 125 all of a sudden think, if they start seeing lights, is somebody going to pop out of the woods onto 125? So what they're doing is they're putting a condition in their approval that within 6 months to a year, they want to revisit to make sure there was no issues. And the way we'd address that is we would just continue the fence across the backside, or some sort of vegetated buffer to just block the headlights from vehicles coming up in this direction. But with this current design, the board's moving forward with approving this design as it is. If we end up having to extend this fence, we would have to come back to the commission. A portion of that fence would be in the buffer zone. It would be in an area that's already proposed to be cleared, so we wouldn't be doing any more clearing. It would just be the construction of a fence in the buffer zone. The one other issue that the planning board did have is we did request a special permit for the reduction in parking. So it's my understanding what they've done on the past for some other projects that have requested this relief is, again, they've gone back to the site 6 months to a year later to see, is it working? Do we need to add more parking? And if we had to do that, one of the things we would do is we'd continue the parking lot back into Andover. Again, the reason we didn't do it was there was no need for it. The facility's been functioning fine with the parking they have. They feel that they can function fine, and based on the numbers, they should be able to function fine with the reduction that's allowed in the parking. But again, if we do have to add it, it'll be off in this direction. We would have to come back to the commission if we had to revise it. Most likely what would happen is this detention basin would just get a little larger to accommodate the additional pavement. All the setbacks would still be maintained, would still meet your wetlands bylaw and your wetlands regulations. One of the other questions Lisa had brought up was runoff that comes down this existing parking lot is going to maintain its exact same flow, which is down in this direction, and then goes into this catch basin here. Lisa's concerned that, with a much larger flow, with this ramp here, is there a potential of the runoff bypassing, hitting a small change in topography, and then heading out towards the wetland and bypassing the drainage system? So what we've proposed is a section of curbing along that edge, and that'll keep the runoff to get to where the existing pavement swales back to ensure that no runoff will actually head out beyond that point. Lisa also brought up an issue regarding erosion control. We originally proposed just silt fence. And Lisa had mentioned that we might want additional erosion control, potentially filter sock and silt fence in this vicinity where our grading is a lot closer to the wetlands. So what we've done is we've revised the plan, and we're proposing silt fence with the filter sock running this entire length up to this point. We're about 48 feet from the wetlands. We got some minor grading in here. We're just proposing silt fence. And then in this area, where we're coming close to the 25-foot no disturb, we've got the silt fence with the filter sock all the way up to the point in this vicinity where all we're doing is just constructing that curb. And that's going to be nothing more. We're going to have to excavate down with a bucket about 2.5, 3 feet wide, get down to hopefully the subgrade underneath the existing parking lot if it's there, and then build that curbing in there, and then back that curbing with soil so that it'll have something, so it'll be able to sustain being plowed and not just get ripped up. So we felt that the filter fabric in that location is more than sufficient based on the minimal amount of work that we're doing in that location. And again, as soon as we turn this corner, we just have silt fence in that location based on all the runoffs heading back towards the wetland in this direction, very little grading off in that direction. And the only other comment or revision to the plan was DEP actually had one comment about the soil test data and that they needed the soil test data. The soil test data was actually provided in the drainage study. However, just to make things a little easier, we actually added the soil test data to sheet 4 of the site plan along with the estimated seasonal high water table so that they could see that we do have the required separation from estimated seasonal high water table to the bottom of the infiltration basin. And that's pretty much the revisions that were made to the plan. Again, the planning board is ready to close the hearing and issue the permit at the next meeting. They were just keeping it open to see if commission had any concerns or if any issues came up that we haven't already addressed.
I would say, given the comments, probably the only thing that we would condition differently that maybe isn't included in the order as I drafted it would be, usually we want those fences 6 inches off the ground. So
Okay.
things can pass back and forth underneath.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sean, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Oh, Al?
No questions.
Doug?
No questions.
Jack?
Any waivers requested?
No.
With this application? No other questions?
Yep.
No questions.
All right, so, how do you want to approach, will you usually close things out before planning, or?
So you feel confident that, I mean, I talked to Jean tonight, and she highlighted what was just discussed. We hadn't seen this plan since we didn't meet 2 weeks ago. So it seems like we're more on the same page than I had previously thought.
The only thing I'm curious about, the fence issue, can we condition the fence so they don't have to come before us for a
Yeah,
modification?
I would say that, the fence is proposed, and that if the fence needed to extend around the parking lot, that it would be under the same conditions that the current fence is
And we
allowed.
could propose, we'd bring the plan into the conservation office, and maybe you could condition that the office has the ability to approve it if it's within an area that was already altered, and no additional clearing would be required.
There would still be, no waiver would be necessary for the fencing.
Correct.
Right, I mean, instead of them coming back here for another modification for 40 feet of fence.
We can update that when we review the order.
Okay. All right, motion?
If we, I mean, we can close tonight, but if something unexpected happens with planning, it makes it difficult.
Just to wait and issue the order, and even though it's drafted, issue it in 2 weeks.
Yeah, because it's not going to change the
Yeah,
time
if,
of the project at all.
And you have a month of wait time with the planning, and you only have
Right.
10 days with us, so.
Exactly. If Jennifer says that she has the ability to put the order together and we can close an issue at the last meeting, at the next meeting, I have no problem continuing. And you're right, that gives us
It's
the
already
ability.
drafted.
If something pops up and we have to modify the plan, then we don't have to get into how do we get that back into the record now and reopen the hearing and deal with that.
Okay, all
That sounds like a good idea.
right, so a motion to continue?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Or Doug.
Opposed?
Who you heard louder.
Okay, all set.
And Doug muttered something.
Do you have to put that in the notes?
It's in there. It's in there.
Now, my only question is, if nothing comes up with planning, I don't think you're going to need us
No.
at the next meeting.
No,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Okay. Loved one. 242-1589, requesting continue to 325.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. 242-257, requested continue to 325.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. 242-333, PCOC request for 44. Is that in twice, Jen?
No, there are two different order numbers.
Sorry, okay.
Same as, but will apply to both when completed.
We have a motion and a second, right? All those in favor say aye.
Haven't done it.
Aye.
Yeah, close enough. Yep. Doug muttered something. Okay, we have a violation enforcement order, 1116 Great Pond Road, request to continue to 311.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. We have a violation enforcement order 105 Mass Ave.
So this is the old
Desmond
Desmond's Landscaping. When the property sold, it appears everything that was on that site was pushed to the back of the site. And we never issued them an enforcement order for stockpiling, sort of in small areas around as a landscape site. But when they went and pushed everything to the back, you know, the pile's now taller than the building, and you could probably see it from 495. That's floodplain, so be it bordering land subject to flooding. And if you think about it, it probably could displace a good amount of flood water should it flow in, not to mention make a really big mess. So I contacted the new owners. They already had plans and wrote me a letter, which is in your packets, that they will have it moved as soon as weather allows, likely April, but at the latest May. So under the enforcement order that I issued them, they provided the plan in the the time that I asked them to provide it. And B, we've already authorized them to restore to original conditions, so I think just, what do we call it?
Extend it.
Not extend it, confirming the enforcement order will be adequate to allow them to do, and then continue the matter to the first June meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Okay. Bylaw regulations review.
So we're still working
We're
on
still working on
the stormwater aspect of, and I think we're gonna look to go with what Doug said about potentially just referencing the standards in the stormwater bylaw, but I still have to talk to Lisa about that. She was away and I was away, and with snowstorms and whatnot, so we'll get to that discussion very soon, but one of the.
Thought ought to be, do the same thing.
And yes, we've actually encumbered some money for Lisa to work on those regulations already, just today. So that's underway. But one of the things DEP did in their reg revisions was include a lot more minor exempt activities. And what I thought we might want to do is expand the small project list to include more of those minor exempt activities. Some of them that make a lot of sense are like bulkhead replacements, if you have a bulkhead and you want to replace it. Installation of ramps for handicap accessibility, that's one that's actually come up a couple times. So it's not that we wouldn't have any review, they wouldn't be totally exempt as they are under the Wetlands Protection Act, but you know, again, these are all outside of the 50-foot no-build zone. Although bulkhead replacement, I could see, you know, if your bulkhead exists and is lawfully existing, as long as you don't require a waiver to replace it, you're gonna put it someplace else that puts it in the 50 or whatever, it could potentially be in the 50.
Bulkhead is usually part of a foundation.
Right,
Very difficult to move a bulkhead.
right, but just to replace it, a lot of people wanna
They're
make them more
usually just replacing the
watertight.
top, the cup.
Or that you might wanna dig it out and replace but it's in the ground, I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't pose much of a hazard to a wetland.
No.
Again, these are just for consideration. The next bunch, I'll include utilities and work within roadways that DEP has now exempted. So if you want to replace any utility line within a roadway or a driveway under certain conditions, and DEP is very specific about the conditions. I don't list them here, but we made you a copy. I guess maybe the best thing is to take the list that I've listed and look at the DEP regs and decide which, if any, you think are feasible to include in the small project regulations.
Right, so we'll table this for the next meeting.
So Jen, is the intent to have a jurisdiction under the small project instead of it being exempt by?
Right, so DEP has exempted them.
Yeah.
Under certain conditions, and they list their conditions, you'll see them in there, but we wouldn't necessarily exempt them the way DEP has, but we would make it a lot easier to file. There'd be no abutter notification, no public hearing, no newspaper notification. They would still have to come before us and tell us how, what, when, where, why, but they wouldn't necessarily have to do the permitting hoops that they're required to do now on a lot of these things.
Are these projects typically an RDA at this point?
Some of them are,
Yeah.
yep.
Like underground utilities, that probably
Well,
would
the
be.
utilities have been more of an issue. That's why I think you'd want to read the things that DEP has sort of, they have to be 10 feet away from bank, and there are more restrictions, and I think we'd have to reference those in our small project guidelines, that they could do these things under the same conditions listed in the exemption lists, 10.02, whatever they are.
Okay.
But I don't know if you want to do, like, for next meeting, try to go through and do a yay or nay, this seems reasonable, this does not seem reasonable.
I'm looking at the next meeting agenda. I don't think we're gonna get to this, unless you think we can. Almost everything got continued for this meeting.
Yeah, but I think most are going to
Valid.
close an issue.
Yeah.
I don't think there'll be a lot of discussion
Well,
at
it
the
doesn't
next
hurt to
meeting.
put it on there.
Well, we can see. We've gotten to this before and said, it's too late, let's go home.
One night we didn't, I remember that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We
like
should've.
11 when we left. But the more review you could do at home and bring back to the meeting for
Yeah.
next time, we'll make it go much faster.
Some of them seem very straightforward and
Right.
simple. Other ones,
Yeah, you really have to look at what the
Require some-
DEP regulations
Sewer lines,
require
utility
for
lines.
exemption
This is still
before you
open,
say,
We didn't close that, right?
No, we didn't.
Okay, all right.
okay, so we'll continue that till 2:25.
Yeah.
We need to motion and second that because
So
we do
moved.
advertise.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. Jen, you have the High Street one, we're not gonna close on this one, right?
No, we didn't close 351 Willow. We did close High. Oh, it closed last meeting, sorry.
Oh, okay.
This is the West Mill,
Oh.
the parking lot and the demolition of the building, all of that.
Oh, okay, all right. Like I said, they got 3 foot.
Yeah, they were on again tonight, right, for the pond.
Right.
But different project.
So,
1629, 242, 1629, is that right?
yeah,
Right, so, this is the one that Lisa had some special conditions that I think Al had been pretty good that we discussed. Sort of the first one is the mitigation proposal, that's condition 35. There's a buffer zone restoration plan, needs to be monitored for fall and spring 2 years. I changed the requirements, they only show silt fence on some of their locations along the pond, and I informed the applicant that I didn't think that was adequate and that we would be conditioning more erosion control, so that's in there. I set the bond at $25,000, that's for parking, restoration, and stormwater. Condition 57 is that they will be required to do a SWIP and that we will get to review it prior to to review it prior to them filing it.
Jen, on 59, we had that discussion on that, I had raised a question on that tank, and they assured us that it was in great condition or good condition. And you have it here that the owner will identify an acceptable plan to ensure the reliability. Is there any way of getting it certified?
No, but currently, only one of the two pumps was working, so they were gonna have, be upgrading it, and that they would, prove to us at the end that there's both a plan in place for it to work and a backup plan if it shouldn't. I don't know of any certification
Yeah,
for that sort of thing.
It doesn't matter if the pumps work, if there's nothing to pump it into, there's,
No, that's a tank. The tank itself, I think they've already determined is sound. It was more the pump system, but we can see what they provide us
yeah, I'd like
for
to
that,
see.
and
I mean,
if
Like
we want more.
an inspection
yeah,
report.
and like, if somebody's just looking at the hole, yeah, okay, it's all set. There's gotta be somebody that can certify it. I mean, it could last 5 years, 10 years.
Okay, so,
5 days.
so I'll just put something in there about a report of its
Yeah, an inspection report.
viability.
Inspection report.
Somebody should be able to certify that tank. I mean, it's critical for this project.
And then a written report becomes part of our record.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, good point.
So condition 64 is where we get into that precision piece that Lisa had documented. So as documented during stormwater peer review, construction of the drainage system will require a great deal of precision. As such, the system shall be constructed in strict accordance with the design and under the supervision of a qualified engineer. Inverts of all drainage structures will be field verified during installation. Any disparities or circumstances requiring adjustments of the design should be brought to the attention of the NACC or its designees for review and approval. So basically, if they're off of, a half a foot, they need to be back in front of us before they're, covering that up and putting parking lot over it.
Half a foot, it doesn't.
Half an inch.
Yeah, right.
Didn't want to make it.
Heidi should be living down there for.
No, not Heidi. This is beyond our capabilities of monitoring. This is
We don't
an
need any-
engineer
we don't need any
standing there.
Projects that we have to
So who's
monitor.
hiring the monitor?
They will be.
Are we approving the monitor before
We will approve, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Sweeping, grading, stockpiling, washing trucks. So no stockpiling signs, no,
Just, go back to 64 for a minute. When you say any disparities or circumstances requiring adjustment of design before or during construction should be brought to the attention, it should be brought to our attention before actual construction,
okay, so prior to,
prior to
Yep.
them actually physically constructing it in
Yep.
place.
got it.
Bring it to our attention.
The idea is to have it field verified during installation.
Right.
So they're installing, and then they have to notify if there's any discrepancies.
Right.
Like this project has no room for after-the-fact modifications.
Right.
It says adjustments in design, so that means before construction.
Before construction, so I will add
Oh,
that in there. Yep.
yeah. You're right, Doug. Yeah, you're right.
During construction, if there's a discrepancy, they need to tell us immediately. And if the, whoever reviews this or certifies it is gonna, if he comes across a discrepancy, and then he needs to bring it to our attentions immediately and not a couple of
build
months
it.
later.
Got it.
I don't know if, I'm just thinking about, I don't know if this is pertinent with us because of the demolition of the building, but the building's 200 years old.
No, it's not. This building was built much more recent than that, 80s or 90s. It's,
Oh, really?
that portion of the building is very new.
Oh, okay, because I was thinking of asbestos and
No,
all
no.
that other good stuff.
I mean, they'll still have to deal with all of that sort of thing but if it's in there, but the building is not old,
Oh, okay.
that portion of the building,
Okay,
unlike the other portions of the building.
right.
So Lisa had added in, and Joe had approved too, that 78, the coal tar-based pavement sealants, the PAHs, she would like to see that as a continuing condition in some of our orders, because that is resulting in water quality impacts, kind of like our pesticides and fertilizers. And then the standard, no snow stockpiling, no dumping of leaves, all that good stuff. And then she also added in, to the certifications for the condition 82 for this certificate of compliance. So I think it's in the as-built post-development elevations of all drainage and stormwater. That's the standard, the first sentence. But then she added specifically, as-built plans should include inverts of all drainage structures above and below grade and an engineer's certification that the drainage system has been constructed and is in functioning in accordance with the approved design. That's a new statement in there. And given some of our recent stormwater reviews on projects, it's probably one we should leave in for all of them.
I agree.
Because we get too little information sometimes to be able to certify these things post-construction.
I agree, that pretty lays it right out.
And then just all those good continuing conditions. They do, we somehow skimmed over it, but they do have the ability, the restoration includes the use of pesticides on the, herbicides. There's a limitation on pesticides and herbicides, but it does allow herbicides for the removal of the Phragmites along the bank at the back of the pond.
Any questions? Motion?
Move that we issue the order of conditions for 242-1629 as drafted and amended.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous.
Question
Yes.
before we, that condition number 78 on coal tar-based pavement sealants? Is that something we should consider putting into our boilerplate?
That's what she said, it should be. in the
Boilerplate on all, because I was thinking of that driveway we were discussing earlier.
Right, well, that one hasn't been approved, but that would be another
Were
good
it
place.
to be approved.
I mean, I think if any place we're adding pavement or approving pavement, we would
Right.
add that condition. I think if you put a deck on your house, we then maybe don't add that condition in,
No,
but in this kind of situation,
That
yes.
stuff is very, they don't even hardly make it anymore. It's
Yeah,
all,
but-
it's all,
but-
I know, I know it's
you
good
don't-
to
But you
have.
don't know, because, you know,
I agree.
if somebody installs a driveway and they hire that guy that's got the truck with the driveway sealant, you just don't know.
Yeah.
And if you don't specifically prohibit it,
Yeah.
you're gonna get it.
Yeah, I think it's something that's coming out in the literature now that
You'll know,
you'll smell it.
and by price.
Oh, okay.
Price is, there's not, the guy ain't coming into a $200 driveway sealer with coal-based, sealant.
But you know what I'm talking about.
No, I know. I know.
I'm trying to behave.
No, I think that should be, those last, all those, add-ons and those last two, I think we should put that in all our stuff. That's
Will do.
good stuff.
So, and then I brought your MACC registrations.
Oh, what are we doing
Scan them
with,
to me. We're not gonna do 351 because we didn't close it,
Okay, cool.
but we will do it next meeting if planning's all set.
All right, so we're gonna save it, or you wanna reprint it?
You can give it back to me if you want me just to redistribute it next meeting.
Sure. Why not? 'Cause I'm only gonna recycle it.
What are we giving back?
350,
Muffin,
1639.
Giving back
Muffin
16.
Man.
What else we giving back?
Guys, give it back.
You want anything else back?
Nope, just 1639. The rest you can recycle.
I haven't.
Okay, so we're all set?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Opposed? Next unanimous.